step into the world of sealed corridors, sunken keeps, and hidden citadels, where discoveries were swiftly buried and forbidden from view. Walk through labyrinthine tunnels carved by ancient hands, trace cryptic carvings worn by centuries, and examine objects that have resisted decay, preserving secrets that challenge understanding. In these hidden spaces, human ingenuity and secrecy intertwine, and the line between history and enigma begins to blur. Each site holds fragments of stories deliberately hidden, waiting to be uncovered. Follow the echoes of civilizations long vanished, and sense the mysteries that endure in places the world has been forbidden to explore further. The basalt chambers of Qumran. Beneath the pale ridges of the Judean desert, where wind carries grains of ancient salt across the gullies that once sheltered the Qumran community, an excavation began with careful optimism and a measured sense of routine. Archaeologists had long returned to this place in search of overlooked fragments from the Second Temple period, tracing the daily life of the settlement that had produced the Dead Sea Scrolls. Their trenches followed the familiar grid on the plateau, cutting through layers of collapsed installations and charred storage rooms, until one team found a narrow fault in the bedrock that appeared to descend deeper than the mapped structures. The area was not marked for significant discovery, yet the darkness gathering below the exposed edge suggested that something substantial lay beneath the known complex of Qumran. That fissure widened under controlled chiselling, revealing a vertical drop that carried no trace of the plastered walls typical of ritual baths, nor the rubble indicative of collapsed dwellings. Instead, the stone was basaltic in colour and texture, unexpected in a region dominated by limestone and marl. The early reports described the surface as unnaturally smooth, as if shaped by a technique not aligned with the construction practices of the settlement. When the first camera lowered into the void, transmitting images of a perfectly hewn chamber extending into darkness, the supervising archaeologists paused their work, unsure whether the cavity represented a natural geological anomaly or a structure carved with deliberate intention. Additional equipment was brought in, including a lightweight ladder and atmospheric sensors. The descent team noted that the air carried no traces of bat colonies or desert-dwelling insects, only a dry stillness that suggested the chamber had been sealed for an extraordinary period of time. The floor was made of interlocking basalt tiles, fitted so tightly that sand had not penetrated the seams. Such precision did not correspond to the masonry of the Qumran settlement, which relied heavily on local stone and hand-shaped tools. The incongruence introduced a quiet tension among the researchers, and the site director ordered detailed scans of the chamber's perimeter before any physical sampling could begin. Those scans detected corridors branching outward beneath the plateau, each one carved from the same dark stone. The outlines suggested a subterranean complex far larger than the exposed ruins above, stretching below layers that dated to long before the Essenes had settled the area. Rooms appeared to follow an architectural plan inconsistent with the region's burials, water channels, or storage facilities. Some corridors possessed angular recesses that resembled niches, while others sloped downward with smooth, uninterrupted surfaces. The absence of inscriptions or ceramic remnants left the researchers with no cultural anchor to guide interpretation, and this uncertainty lent the chambers an unnerving quality. The shapes felt intentional, yet refused to align with any known tradition of the Judean desert. A small team advanced into the first corridor, marking their path with high-lumen lights that caught faint patterns along the basalt walls. The patterns were not carvings, but subtle variations in the stone itself, forming linear streaks that appeared under certain angles of illumination. One geologist on site proposed that these streaks might represent cooling fractures from an ancient lava flow, yet no volcanic activity was known to have shaped the desert's geology. The basalt remained the central contradiction, a material utterly foreign to the plateau's composition, raising questions about how such stone could have been quarried, transported, and shaped into a subterranean structure that predates recorded habitation. A second chamber opened beyond a bend, containing a circular depression at its centre. The depression's edges were too sharply defined to be natural, and lacked any residue of liquid ash or habitation. It looked more like a receptacle designed to hold an object long removed. Surrounding it were 12 evenly spaced pillars carved from the same stone, their surfaces unmarked yet perfectly symmetrical. Archaeologists documented the arrangement extensively, noting that its precision surpassed the craftsmanship found in Hellenistic or Roman structures in the surrounding region. The symmetry carried an austere beauty that did not align with ritual complexes known in Judea, creating a growing sense that this place served a purpose entirely outside the expectations of the excavation. As the team advanced further, they noticed a slow drop in temperature that instruments confirmed. The chambers grew colder in a manner unrelated to outdoor conditions, though no drafts or openings could be identified. Within this deepening chill, a sound occasionally resonated along the basalt corridors, faint and metallic. The acoustic engineer accompanying the team suggested that the shape of the chambers might be amplifying microseismic activity from the nearby faults, but the cadence of the sound felt less geological and more rhythmic, as though something within the stone responded to movement in the air. The discovery of a sealed doorway altered the tone of the investigation. The door was not an independent object, but a section of the wall whose boundaries formed a near-perfect rectangle. A millimetre-thin seam encircled it, barely perceptible until a flashlight caught its outline. The material was identical to the chamber walls, which made the existence of a movable section even more puzzling. The archaeologists tested the seam with precision tools, only to find that it resisted every attempt to measure its depth. When ground-penetrating radar scanned beyond it, the signal diffused in a way the technicians could not explain, as if the basalt absorbed the frequencies instead of reflecting them. Days of careful study yielded nothing conclusive, prompting the team to send preliminary findings to the Regional Antiquities Authority. They included high-resolution imagery, geological analyses, and structural maps demonstrating the chamber's scale. The response arrived without delay. The excavation was to be halted until a review committee could evaluate the site's security and heritage implications. Researchers familiar with the bureaucratic pace of archaeological oversight found the order unusually abrupt. Within hours, additional officials arrived from Jerusalem, accompanied by personnel who did not disclose their department affiliations. They inspected the descending shaft, reviewed the data drives, and questioned the team about the deeper corridors that had not yet been entered. The following morning, access to the excavation was restricted behind temporary fencing, and the team's equipment was collected for transport. Several archaeologists protested the sudden shutdown, noting that the Qumran plateau was internationally recognized and routinely studied, yet their concerns were dismissed without explanation. The basalt samples they had collected were taken for further analysis, though no one could say where they were being sent. The team members were instructed to refrain from discussing the discovery, and the few who attempted to inquire about the site after returning to their institutions found that their messages went unanswered. Rumours circulated quietly among scholars who had worked in the region. Some suggested that the basalt chambers represented a pre-settlement phase, predating the traditional chronology of Judea's occupation, while others speculated that the structure may have belonged to an unknown cultural group that left no surface remains. A few pointed to the metallic resonances and geometric precision as signs of engineering far beyond the expectations of the period. None of these theories gained traction, as no official records acknowledged the excavation's findings, and the plateau's new security measures prevented any independent verification. In the months that followed, satellite imagery of the site showed unusual activity. Certain areas appeared to be covered with temporary shelters, and tracks from heavy equipment marked the desert surface. Researchers who had once walked freely across the plateau noticed that satellites updated those tiles less frequently, and publicly accessible archives displayed blurred patches where the excavation had been. The secrecy surrounding the chambers deepened their mystery, becoming a quiet point of debate among scholars who knew better than to speak openly about sealed digs in politically sensitive regions. To this day, no public report has surfaced detailing what lay beyond the rectangular seam in the basalt wall, and those who once touched its unnaturally smooth surface have found no opportunity to return to the chambers beneath Qumran. Some speculate that the stone corridors hold a history incompatible with established narratives, while others fear that the chambers may contain knowledge never meant for discovery. What remains is the uneasy silence of a structure carved with impossible precision, hidden below a desert that has learned to keep its oldest secrets buried. The iron tablets of Gobekli Tepe. Archaeologists working among the ancient enclosures of Gobekli Tepe had grown accustomed to predictable layers of stone and soil, each season revealing only what the pre-pottery Neolithic world was expected to leave behind. The great limestone pillars that rose from the earth had already transformed early human history, challenging long-held assumptions about religion, cooperation, and the timeline of monumental architecture, yet most days on the plateau were methodical and quiet. Researchers sifted through compacted sediments, traced the edges of circular foundations, and recorded small finds ranging from flint tools to animal bones, each discovery folded neatly into a site whose mysteries were grand but structurally consistent. This was a place shaped by skilled hands more than 12,000 years ago, but it was also a place where surprises rarely broke the rhythms of careful excavation. Not far from the main enclosure, a field assistant hesitated when her trowel met a section of earth that responded with an unfamiliar hardness. The sound lacked the dull scrape of stone and carried instead a sharper resonance, almost metallic, that caught the attention of the trench supervisor. Measurements were taken, brushes prepared, and the small team positioned themselves around the anomaly with the practiced composure that guided every cautious movement on this fragile site. They expected perhaps a particularly dense patch of limestone, or a compacted deposit created by ancient backfill, something explainable within the normal range of geological variation. Yet the earth in that narrow patch behaved with an unnatural consistency, resisting their tools as if guarding something that had no place in such an ancient layer. From the narrow trench wall, a sliver of reflected light signalled the presence of metal where none should logically exist. The reflection arrived in a thin, sharp line, startling in its clarity against the muted tones of the soil. For a moment, no one spoke, each member of the team aware of the impossible contradiction that glimmer represented. Gobekli Tepe belonged to a world long before metallurgy, long before any known culture had learned to smelt or cast iron. The earliest confirmed iron production in Anatolia would occur thousands of years later, during the 2nd millennium BCE, far removed from the time when the builders of Gobekli Tepe shaped pillars and carved intricate reliefs into limestone. The trench supervisor reached in with steady hands, brushing away the soil until the unmistakable edge of a metal plate emerged, its surface darkened but uncorroded despite its unimaginable age. Once lifted from the soil, the iron tablets released a muted clink against the tools laid beside them, a sound strikingly out of place among limestone fragments. Their form was roughly rectangular, though softened by time, and their surfaces carried a faint sheen that caught the sunlight with unsettling uniformity. The weight of the tablets suggested pure or nearly pure iron, though no smelting facility could have existed on this plateau at the time Gobekli Tepe was active. The team worked in subdued astonishment, each movement slow, each breath measured, as if any sudden action might disrupt the inexplicable reality that lay before them. Soil samples were taken, sketches drawn, and initial photographs captured in a process so controlled that it seemed almost ritualistic, as though documenting an artifact that defied the boundaries of human chronology required a reverence beyond standard practice. On closer inspection, the surfaces displayed faint linear impressions that resisted categorization within known prehistoric markings. They were not decorative in the stylistic sense observed on the T-shaped pillars, nor did they resemble functional scoring or tool marks left by ancient stoneworkers. Instead, the lines appeared in a subtle rhythm of spacing and depth, their arrangement neither symmetrical nor random. They occupied the metal with the quiet insistence of a system that communicated something, though not in the manner of any language pictograph or proto-symbolic form recorded from the region. The markings carried an unsettling precision, as if created with a technique far removed from the flint and stone tools known to the early Neolithic world. Before any preliminary analysis could be completed, officials arrived with a level of urgency that redefined the tone of the excavation. The approach of government vehicles across the plateau broke the stillness that usually surrounded the site during working hours. Personnel from the Ministry of Culture and Tourism stepped out with documents already prepared, their movements marked by efficiency rather than curiosity, and they offered minimal acknowledgement to the archaeologists who had made the discovery. Their presence signalled a shift that every researcher recognised immediately. Whatever these tablets represented, they would not remain in academic hands for long. During the rapid shutdown that followed, the tablets were secured inside heavy containers and carried away while the team was ordered to step back from the trench. Additional security surrounded the enclosure, establishing a perimeter that exceeded the protocols typically used to protect heritage sites. Field notes were reviewed, photographed, and removed from the immediate area, leaving the researchers uncertain which records they would be permitted to retain. The trench itself was filled in with unusual speed, the soil compacted to erase any visible trace of the context in which the tablets had been found. By late afternoon, the entire section of the dig had fallen into a state of enforced quiet, the kind that suggested not caution but containment. In the days that followed, researchers attempted quietly to reconcile the find with established timelines of Anatolian metallurgy, none able to bridge the chronological gap. Iron artifacts from the Neolithic are unknown, not through lack of preservation but through the absence of any technological framework that could produce them. Even the earliest known meteoritic iron tools appeared much later in human history and were extremely rare, shaped from naturally occurring iron-nickel material rather than smelted metal. Yet the tablets from Gobekli Tepe bore no characteristics of meteoritic origin, lacking the telltale crystalline patterns that such iron contains. Their existence contradicted every sequence of technological progression, challenging the most fundamental assumptions about craft, capability, and cultural development in the ancient world. Across private conversations and closed academic forums, the discovery revived long-standing questions about the deliberate burial of Gobekli Tepe thousands of years before recorded history. The site had been intentionally covered around 8000 BCE, its pillars entombed beneath tons of sediment, as though its builders sought to conceal its structures from future eyes. That decision, once interpreted as a ritual act or a shift in communal identity, now acquired a more unsettling dimension when considered alongside the sudden government intervention. The resonance between ancient concealment and modern restriction lingered heavily in the minds of those who had witnessed the tablets firsthand, casting a shadow over the plateau's long history of interpretation. And while the tablets vanished behind official silence, the improbable weight of iron beneath a Stone Age sanctuary continues to press against every accepted origin story. The Desert Vault of Wusta. A pale stillness hung over the scattered hollows that once held the waters near Wusta, across the wide and wavering expanse of the Nafud Desert. Archaeologists had been surveying the region for decades, drawn by the promise of early human fossils and artifacts buried beneath its rolling sands. Here, prehistoric populations left faint traces of their presence: chipped flint tools, scattered stone implements, and rare bone fragments that hinted at migration across Arabia tens of thousands of years ago. Yet nothing in this known record prepared the team for the anomaly that would soon appear: a subterranean chamber concealed beneath layers of wind-blown sand and compacted silt, seemingly preserved against the harsh desert climate for millennia. Not far from the dried margin of an ancient paleolake, survey instruments first detected a disruption beneath a slumped ridge of sand that seemed younger than the formation surrounding it. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a void, rectangular and unusually consistent, unlike any natural cavity formed by erosion or sediment compaction. The team began careful test trenches, brushing away sand to reveal faint outlines of cut stone, each edge unnaturally straight for a desert environment so frequently reshaped by wind. Even as the sun climbed over the horizon, the temperature shifting in predictable waves, the anomaly remained distinct, holding the gaze of each researcher with a gravity that was hard to define yet impossible to ignore. When the dunes shifted after an unexpected crosswind, a slanted layer of stone emerged in a pattern too deliberate to be a quirk of desert erosion. The surfaces were smoothed with precision, appearing almost polished, their alignment suggesting architectural intent rather than accident. Geological analysis indicated the stones belonged to local sandstone strata, yet their arrangement could not be explained by natural forces alone. The researchers photographed every detail, measured the angles meticulously, and compared them to known Neolithic construction in Arabia. Nothing matched. The vault appeared to belong to no recorded culture, yet it was clearly human-made, its presence in this remote landscape both compelling and disquieting. Inside the narrow breach that followed the excavation cut, the air thickened in a way that suggested deeper chambers carved long before the modern desert took shape. Dust rose slowly from the disturbed floor, illuminated by portable lamps that revealed unexpected textures along the walls, faint grooves, small recesses, and patches of darker mineralization that contrasted with the sandy stone. The temperature dropped perceptibly as the team descended, although sensors indicated no subterranean airflow or water source. Each step carried a weight of discovery, an awareness that they were moving through a space intentionally hidden for reasons lost to history. Within the vault's dim interior, the layout revealed itself slowly, each recessed platform and etched surface exposing a purpose that resisted immediate interpretation. A central basin lay flush with the floor, carved with careful angles and corners so sharp they seemed impossible to have survived thousands of years of natural shifting. Surrounding niches suggested storage or ritual function, though the contents had long vanished or been removed by prior unknown visitors. Faint scratches on some surfaces hinted at tool use, but none corresponded with artifacts previously recovered in the region, adding to the sense of disorientation. Every detail suggested human care, yet no known Neolithic society in Arabia could account for the design or scale. At the far end of the chamber, a corroded iron barrier lay partially embedded in compacted sediment, its presence clashing with everything known about early technologies in the Arabian Peninsula. Iron smelting would not emerge in this region for many millennia, and meteoritic iron tools, when found elsewhere, were rare and small. This object, however, bore signs of deliberate shaping, its surface etched faintly with lines that might have been functional or symbolic. The discrepancy between the vault's age and the material composition challenged the team's understanding of technological progression, introducing a tension that extended beyond archaeology into the realm of historical paradox. The moment photographs and structural scans were sent to regional authorities, an abrupt directive halted all further descent into the newly uncovered space. Vehicles arrived across the sand, personnel emerged with documentation and strict instructions, and the excavation was immediately sealed. The vault was cordoned off, and every instrument, measurement, and sample collected from the breach was confiscated for further analysis. The researchers were instructed to suspend discussion of the find in any public or academic forum, leaving them with the unsettling awareness that they were witnessing something both extraordinary and deliberately suppressed. In the weeks that followed the shutdown, fragments of internal reports circulated quietly among researchers who noted omissions too strategic to be accidental. Chemical analyses were referenced without results, and geophysical scans hinted at further chambers beyond the iron barrier but gave no details. Satellite imagery confirmed unusual activity at the site, and a subtle rearrangement of dune surfaces suggested heavy equipment had altered the landscape to obscure the vault. Scholars familiar with the region understood that Wusta had long been a repository of early human activity, but now a deliberate secrecy lay over a discovery that could have rewritten timelines of habitation, migration, and technology. As the sands crept back across the cordoned perimeter, the silence surrounding the site deepened, leaving only scattered hints of what rested beneath the sealed stone basin. The desert, relentless in its shifting and concealing, seemed to reclaim the vault even as modern authority intervened. Every footstep, every measurement, every cautious glance into the breach had documented only a fragment of the structure's total scale and complexity. Archaeologists could only imagine the full extent of the chamber, its construction, and the object that had forced such abrupt suppression. Time and sand together concealed what human hands had hidden once, and authorities now reinforced that concealment in the present. Somewhere under the drifting dunes, the unanswered questions of Wusta wait in a darkness no one is permitted to enter. The glacier graves of Vatnajokull. Ice stretched in uninterrupted white fields, fractured only by wind-sculpted ridges and hidden crevasses, where every step could vanish into shadow or snow. It was within this frozen expanse that researchers first detected something unusual beneath the surface layers of Vatnajokull, a chamber of preserved secrets that authorities would soon forbid anyone to approach. The glacier, Europe's largest, covers thousands of square kilometres of northeastern Iceland, and its vast shifting mass has preserved traces of human and animal activity for centuries, occasionally revealing remnants from eras thought long past. Yet, even among this well-studied landscape, the anomaly drew immediate attention for the precision and permanence with which it had been entombed in ice. A subtle discoloration in the glacier caught the team's attention, a hint of organic matter trapped where only ice should exist. Initial probes indicated a pocket within the ice far more compact and stable than the surrounding layers, a cavity large enough to suggest deliberate placement rather than accident. The area had been known for occasional Viking-era finds and scattered Neolithic tools, yet nothing in these layers could account for the size and orientation of what now lay beneath the surface. Researchers measured the ice thickness and density, noting the sharp contrast in mineral content and stratigraphy that indicated centuries of undisturbed preservation. Reaching the site required careful navigation across brittle surfaces and deep fissures, each movement measured against the unforgiving cold and treacherous terrain. The expedition team relied on crampons, ropes and heated shelters to prevent frostbite and equipment failure, aware that any misstep could result in injury or loss of samples. Crevasses opened without warning, and shifting ice made the edges of the cavity unpredictable. Yet the team pressed on, guided by radar and infrared scans that confirmed the hollow beneath, revealing shapes that were unmistakably human in origin, carefully arranged and surrounded by fragments of wood and textile long thought incapable of surviving the Icelandic climate. Once cleared of the upper ice, skeletal remains emerged alongside wooden fragments and textiles, remarkably preserved by the glacier's chill. The bones were complete enough to suggest intentional burial, rather than incidental death or natural entrapment. Small tools and personal objects lay nearby, knives with wooden handles, intricately wrapped textiles, and fragments of containers whose construction implied careful craftsmanship. The preservation was extraordinary, with soft tissue traces and organic fibres remaining largely intact due to the stable sub-zero environment, offering a glimpse of practices and lifestyles impossible to study in any warmer climate. Even seasoned glaciologists and archaeologists marvelled at the combination of age, arrangement, and intact organic material. Preliminary dating revealed a chronology that confounded expectations, suggesting human activity in layers far older than Iceland's recorded settlement. Radiocarbon samples from wooden fragments and textile fibres indicated dates predating known Viking or Norse presence by several centuries, possibly extending into periods of early exploration or unknown habitation. The burial techniques, including orientation, grave spacing and artifacts, did not match Viking-era norms, nor did they correspond with previously recorded prehistoric practices in Northern Europe. These contradictions created an immediate sense of urgency and tension among the team, whose findings threatened to rewrite long-held understandings of human activity in this remote and hostile region. Before an extensive study could continue, Icelandic authorities arrived with orders to close the site and restrict all access, sealing it against further investigation. Vehicles approached over snowfields, and officials from cultural heritage and environmental agencies quickly cordoned off the excavation area. Equipment and preliminary samples were removed, and the team was instructed to suspend field notes and photography. The abruptness of the closure suggested that the anomaly was not merely of scientific interest, but potentially sensitive for reasons beyond academic curiosity. The glacier, which had preserved these graves for centuries, now became an arena of secrecy, monitored and protected under modern regulations. Over the following weeks, shifting ice and fresh snow buried the chamber once more, erasing footprints and rendering the vault invisible to casual observation. Surface mapping showed slow movement in the ice that threatened to obscure or crush exposed remains, a natural reinforcement of the official restrictions. Even satellite images provided little clarity, as seasonal accumulation blended the cordoned area into the surrounding glacier. The glacier itself became an active participant in concealment, both preserving and erasing evidence in ways no human intervention could fully control. Each thaw, meltwater stream, and snowfall contributed to the sense that the glacier had its own will, a frozen custodian of secrets. Among researchers, discussions were hushed and speculative, referencing temperature stratigraphy and preservation science, while acknowledging the impossibility of recovering definitive information. Debates over the origin of the graves ranged from undocumented Viking expeditions to lost populations that might have reached Iceland far earlier than any written record suggests. The exceptional preservation complicated the matter further. Any exposure risked decay, yet restriction-limited study. Journals and informal reports circulated privately, filled with hypotheses grounded in glaciology, archaeology, and climatology. Still, none could conclusively explain the presence, arrangement, or age of the burials beneath the ice. The glacier, both preserver and eraser, maintained its silent dominion over the remains, leaving the human story trapped within ice layers that would slowly move and melt over centuries. Each season brought the potential for revelation or loss, yet human intervention had imposed its own barrier, a temporal and political curtain over an already enigmatic site. scientists could track ice flow, map its thermal layers, and model potential exposure points. But the exact location and full contents of the glacier graves remained inaccessible, leaving every inference uncertain. In this vast frozen landscape, the interplay of natural preservation and deliberate concealment created a narrative of history that would remain tantalizingly out of reach. Under Vatnajokull's frozen expanse, the glacier graves remain undisturbed, their secrets dissolving imperceptibly with every shifting season. The buried citadel beneath Meroe. Excavation teams had long documented the pyramids and temples of Meroe, tracing the contours of Kushite urbanity with careful precision. Yet beneath the known structures, ground-penetrating radar revealed the outline of a buried citadel, its walls and corridors hidden for centuries under sand and sediment. The city, capital of the Kushite kingdom from roughly 800 BCE to 350 CE, had long yielded pyramids, royal temples, and traces of iron smelting. But nothing prepared archaeologists for the geometric precision and scale of this concealed complex. Its discovery suggested a layer of urban life deliberately buried, a chapter of Meroe's history that authorities would swiftly place off limits. Initial surveys indicated foundations that did not conform to the geometric logic of the surrounding pyramidal complexes, hinting at a structure intentionally concealed from history. Magnetometry and electromagnetic scanning revealed patterns inconsistent with known Kushite settlement layouts. Long walls intersecting at unexpected angles, open courtyards deeper beneath the surface than any recorded buildings, and clusters of small chambers suggestive of storage or defensive purposes. The irregularity of the citadel challenged assumptions about the uniformity of urban planning in the region, suggesting either a previously unknown ruling faction or the imposition of architectural ideas from outside the Nile Valley. As workers removed layers of silt and debris, mud brick walls emerged, their preservation remarkable in the arid conditions of northern Sudan. The walls were surprisingly complete, with evidence of careful plastering and occasional traces of pigment hinting at decorative or ceremonial function. Floors, partially compacted and uneven, bore impressions of foot traffic, indicating that the structure had been used over time rather than abandoned immediately. The team documented every detail meticulously, aware that exposure to air and sunlight could quickly degrade surfaces that had remained stable for centuries under sand and sediment. Within the chambers, artifacts appeared that contradicted expectations: finely wrought ceramics, small iron implements, and symbols unfamiliar in documented Kushite inscriptions. Some ceramics bore decorative motifs closer to Mediterranean or Nubian patterns than to the local Meroitic style, while iron tools hinted at techniques or sources previously undocumented in the region. Inscriptions were sparse, carved into small stone tablets or wooden beams, yet their shape suggested a symbolic or ritual significance distinct from the hieroglyphic script traditionally found in Meroe. Each object deepened the sense of a hidden culture, preserved in deliberate secrecy beneath the familiar city. The internal layout defied known architectural norms, with narrow corridors, concealed staircases, and defensive niches suggesting a fortified or ritualized purpose. Passageways turned sharply, or disappeared behind walls that had been carefully backfilled with sand, and some chambers opened into false alcoves, their function unclear. The structure's irregularity, combined with the presence of both domestic and ceremonial artifacts, indicated a dual purpose: habitation and protection. Scholars noted that similar features were rare in documented Kushite architecture, raising questions about whether this citadel had been a seat of power, a sanctuary, or both. Evidence from slag deposits and small smelting furnaces discovered within side chambers hinted at a secondary function of the citadel, potentially as a hub for local iron production. The fragments of ore, combined with traces of copper and other metals, suggested techniques consistent with Kushite metallurgical practices, but also hinted at experimentation with alloying unknown in other contemporary sites. Small tools and moulds found in adjacent rooms indicated that finished products may have been crafted and stored here before distribution along trade routes connecting the Nile Valley to Central Africa and the Red Sea. This integration of industrial activity within an ostensibly fortified or ceremonial complex suggested the citadel was not merely a defensive or domestic space, but also a strategic centre of economic power, its hidden location perhaps shielding valuable production from rival factions or external invaders. Carbon dating of organic material and metallurgical analysis of artifacts produced inconsistencies that challenged the established chronology of the region's urban development. Wooden beams from the walls suggested construction several centuries earlier than comparable Meroe buildings, while iron implements contained alloy compositions uncharacteristic of local smelting techniques. Pottery fragments and residue from organic containers indicated trade links or cultural influence beyond the expected range of the Kushite kingdom. Each discovery heightened the mystery, revealing a citadel that both belonged to and diverged from the known history of Meroe. Before a full investigation could be completed, government officials arrived to seal the site, citing cultural protection and halting all excavation work. Vehicles carrying representatives from the Sudanese National Corporation for Antiquities and Museums blocked access, and all records, preliminary samples and photographs were collected for review. Excavators were instructed not to publish findings or discuss them publicly, and the perimeter was secured with fencing and surveillance. The citadel, once a hidden chapter of urban life, was now rendered invisible by administrative decree, leaving only partial documentation and speculation to hint at its true scope. Partial surveys and photographs offered tantalizing glimpses of the citadel's hidden rooms, yet most of the underground network remained inaccessible, leaving scholars to speculate based on fragments alone. Scans suggested additional courtyards, staircases and chambers extending beneath the city's known pyramids, and hints of structural symmetry implied a larger, more deliberate urban plan. Yet without direct excavation, researchers could only infer the function of these spaces. The interplay of scientific observation and administrative restriction created a tension that reinforced the citadel's aura of mystery, ensuring that its secrets would not be revealed easily. The city above carried on with its familiar rhythms, unaware that beneath its streets and temples a hidden citadel waited, preserved by sand and official secrecy alike. The pyramids remained visible monuments to the Kushite kings, but the underground structure told a story of human activity, governance and culture deliberately erased from the surface record. Scholars, constrained by both physical and bureaucratic barriers, were left to reconstruct what little they could: a palace, a sanctuary, or a fortification buried beneath centuries of soil and silence. Even centuries of study of Meroe could not prepare them for a discovery that challenged both the known chronology and the assumed uniformity of the kingdom's architecture. Beneath Meroe's sun-baked ruins, the buried citadel endures, a silent testament to human ambition that no excavation has yet fully revealed. The Jade Corridor of Sichuan. A faint glimmer caught the archaeologists' eyes deep within the cave, a thin vein of jade reflecting their lantern's light. As they traced its line, subtle carvings and tool marks became visible along the stone walls, evidence of human activity long concealed. It was here, in this hidden network of caves, that the Jade Corridor was identified, a mineral-rich site authorities immediately restricted from further exploration. The corridor lay within the rugged mountains of Sichuan, where rivers and streams had long shaped the terrain, but what made it extraordinary was the dense evidence of human ingenuity embedded directly in the rock, blending labour, ritual, and resource exploitation into a single, elusive footprint. Careful examination revealed that the jade deposits were not naturally scattered but systematically extracted and shaped, hinting at advanced mining techniques used centuries ago. Shallow grooves in the stone suggested the use of chisels or picks, while small cavities appeared deliberately hollowed for fragment collection. Analysis of mineral veins indicated that the nephrite had been quarried in a manner consistent with Neolithic and early Bronze Age practices, yet some fragments contained trace elements not typically found in local deposits. Scholars speculated that these veins might have been sought for ceremonial or trade purposes, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of both geology and the material's spiritual value. Excavators worked meticulously, removing debris and sediment in tight corridors to preserve both the jade and the fragile remnants of wooden supports and stone tools. The confined space forced teams to advance cautiously, balancing the need for documentation with the risk of destabilizing ceilings and overhangs. Fragments of woven matting and traces of charcoal suggested small fires had been maintained here, perhaps for heat treatment of jade or for ritual illumination. Every step, every brushstroke of sediment removal revealed evidence of human presence carefully preserved by the natural concealment of the caves, as though the site had been deliberately shielded from the surface world. Artifacts emerged, intricately carved pendants, ceremonial objects, and fragments whose design suggested a fusion of Neolithic craftsmanship and early Bronze Age aesthetics. Many of the pendants bore abstract motifs, while others depicted stylized animals endemic to the region, including deer and birds, etched with precision that indicated not only skill but symbolic intent. Some objects contained polished surfaces that would have required extended labour to achieve a reflective sheen, hinting at ceremonial or status-driven significance rather than mere functionality. Even the smallest shards suggested a continuity of purpose. The jade was treasured not only for its beauty but for what it represented within the culture that mined it. Where patterns and traces of transport on jade fragments indicated the corridor once formed part of a sprawling trade network, connecting Sichuan to distant settlements along the Yangtze and farther afield. Some pendants and tools bore traces of mineral inclusions unique to local deposits, while others seemed to derive from sources hundreds of kilometers away, indicating exchange with multiple communities. This connectivity implied that jade from the corridor was not only valued locally for ritual or decorative purposes, but also circulated as a high-status commodity, reinforcing the corridor's significance as both an industrial and cultural hub. Such evidence hinted at a sophisticated understanding of logistics, resource management, and social hierarchy, revealing that the corridor's creators operated within a broader system of influence far beyond the valley itself. Spatial arrangements and wall carvings indicated ritual or ceremonial use, suggesting the corridor was not solely a mining site but a place of symbolic or spiritual importance. Carvings appeared near entrances and junctions between chambers, sometimes aligned with natural fissures in the rock, perhaps marking thresholds or sacred areas. Patterns in the artifact's placement implied deliberate deposition, with ceremonial objects arranged to interact with light filtering through cracks or reflecting from jade surfaces. Such configurations spoke to a cultural sophistication rarely recorded in remote mining areas, hinting at beliefs that intertwined the material, the human act of labour, and the cavernous environment itself. Some tools and jade fragments puzzled researchers, with compositions and designs unlike any previously documented in the region, hinting at external cultural influence or previously unknown local innovation. Certain axe heads contained traces of copper in proportions atypical for the time and location, while some pendants featured carving techniques previously associated with distant northern cultures. Even the physical orientation of tunnels suggested planning informed by ritual or astronomical observation, though no definitive celestial alignment could yet be verified. These anomalies challenged established timelines, raising questions about the corridor's origin, its users, and the network of knowledge that might have connected disparate regions centuries ago. Before a comprehensive study could continue, provincial authorities intervened, sealing the corridor, removing equipment, and restricting access to prevent looting or uncontrolled research. Notices for bad excavation and surveillance ensured that the tunnels remained untouched, preserving the site while simultaneously limiting scholarly inquiry. The sudden enforcement added a layer of mystery. The corridor was known to exist, yet for reasons partially official and partially opaque, its secrets were deliberately withheld from public and academic scrutiny. Even preliminary reports and photographs were restricted, leaving researchers with fragments and observations that only deepened questions about the scale, purpose, and age of the site. Partial scans and photographs revealed glimpses of branching caves and hidden chambers, but the majority of the artifacts and mineral veins remained inaccessible, leaving scholars to reconstruct their purpose from fragments alone. Digital scans suggested complex tunnel networks, possibly forming interlinked chambers that had accommodated both work and ritual. Variations in chamber size indicated functional differences, with some large enough for gatherings or ceremonies, while smaller spaces may have been intended for storage or processing of jade. Each image teased at a human story preserved beneath layers of rock, sediment, and secrecy, yet the inability to explore fully only heightened the sense of a carefully concealed civilization embedded within the mountains. Despite the interruption, evidence suggested a complex intersection of human ingenuity, ritual practice, and resource extraction, preserved beneath layers of rock and sediment for centuries. The corridor represented not only a labour-intensive exploitation of jade, but also a sophisticated understanding of its symbolic and economic value. Artifacts and carvings hinted at the spiritual life of those who had toiled here, while structural choices revealed methods for safeguarding both the material and the rituals associated with it. In the interplay of stone, jade, and human endeavour, the corridor remained a testament to an intelligence that sought to endure, even as it eluded modern discovery. Within the shadowed corridors of Sichuan, the jade waits untouched, its age-old mysteries locked beneath layers of stone, human labour, and silence. The sunken steps of Lake Maracaibo. A sudden shift in the sonar readings caught the team off guard, revealing straight lines and regular terraces hidden beneath decades of sediment. Ripples from passing boats distorted the image on their screens, but careful analysis confirmed the presence of submerged steps stretching across a shallow bay. It was here that the sunken steps of Lake Maracaibo were documented, a forbidden site authorities quickly cordoned off, leaving the full extent and purpose of the structures uncertain. The water was murky and restless, carrying sediment that had long concealed the structures from casual observation. Yet now the outlines of carefully formed ledges emerged with eerie clarity. Divers who descended into the murky waters found the steps partially covered in silt, each ledge carefully formed and aligned in patterns inconsistent with natural formation. Small depressions suggested that the steps had been used repeatedly, while occasional stone fragments hinted at platforms or ceremonial spaces that had once extended from the terraces. The currents were unpredictable, shifting debris and stirring sediment which made precise measurement difficult, but careful observation confirmed the regularity and intentionality of the construction. Every stroke of the diver's brush revealed evidence of human effort, preserved by the very forces that had hidden it for centuries. Excavation was painstaking, requiring dredging, stabilizing loose sediment, and constant monitoring of shifting currents to prevent loss of fragile artifacts or collapse of the steps themselves. Equipment had to be adapted to shallow, silty waters, and sediment samples were carefully bagged for laboratory analysis to determine age and composition. Even with these precautions, visibility was often reduced to mere inches, forcing teams to rely on sonar imaging and tactile mapping to reconstruct the terrace's dimensions. Each cleared ledge revealed subtle signs of modification, chisel marks, worn surfaces, and placement patterns that suggested repeated human activity rather than chance. Among the terraces, fragments of pottery, stone tools, and ceremonial objects were discovered, their materials and craftsmanship hinting at pre-Columbian cultures that had once thrived along the lake's shores. Some pottery fragments bore incised designs, abstract motifs that may have denoted status or spiritual significance, while tools of polished stone suggested a level of sophistication previously undocumented for the region. Organic remnants were sparse due to water exposure, but traces of woven fibre and soot indicated the presence of fires or small offerings. The combination of utilitarian and ceremonial artifacts hinted at terraces that had served multiple purposes, blending work, ritual, and social activity. Embedded in the artifacts were clues to travel and trade that had once connected distant regions. Certain pottery types and mineral inclusions indicated connections to distant settlements along the lake and its tributaries, suggesting that the sunken steps were not isolated but part of a broader network of exchange. Objects made from materials not native to the immediate vicinity hinted at contact with other communities or cultures, implying economic or symbolic exchange across considerable distances. This connectivity suggested that the terraces were valued not only for practical or ceremonial purposes, but also as nodes in a regional system of influence and communication, adding layers of significance to an already enigmatic site. The steps themselves posed more questions than answers. Their precise dimensions, uniform angles, and unexpected orientation suggested a deliberate design, possibly ceremonial, navigational, or both. Some ledges were narrow and steep, while others were wide enough to accommodate gatherings, platforms, or storage spaces. Certain terraces are aligned with shallow channels, as if guiding water or facilitating the movement of people or goods. The regularity of construction defied natural explanation, suggesting human ingenuity capable of shaping the lake's edge into a functional, possibly sacred environment. Sediment analysis revealed rapid burial events, likely caused by flooding or shifting lake levels, which had preserved portions of the steps but also complicated attempts at carbon dating and historical interpretation. Layers of silt and clay suggested sudden influxes of water, burying artifacts and ledges in protective sediment, while erosion in other sections hinted at long-term exposure and partial destruction. These fluctuations not only concealed the site for centuries, but also created a complex record that both preserved and obscured the original context, leaving modern researchers with tantalizing fragments and unanswered questions. Before a full study could proceed, government authorities intervened, sealing the site, removing equipment, and restricting further investigation under heritage protection regulations. Notices warned against diving or mapping the area, and patrols ensured that the sunken steps remained untouched. The sudden enforcement added a layer of intrigue, a site known to exist yet purposefully withheld from public and academic access. Scholars were left with limited data, partial images, and fragments, making interpretation speculative yet grounded in observed fact. Partial sonar scans and limited diver observations provided tantalizing glimpses of branching terraces and adjacent submerged platforms, yet the majority of the sunken steps remain inaccessible and undocumented. Each sonar image suggested additional ledges and platforms extending beyond initial expectations, indicating a scale that may have surpassed any known ceremonial or practical structure in the region. Even small, isolated discoveries of artifacts hinted at a complexity in use and planning, demonstrating that the terraces had once been central to the lives of those who inhabited the lake's shores. Even with limited data, it was clear that the sunken steps represented a sophisticated interplay of human construction, environmental forces, and possibly ritual significance, preserved beneath layers of water and sediment. The terraces reflected not only a practical understanding of materials and hydrology, but also a cultural or spiritual framework that organized human activity around them. In their design, placement, and preservation, the steps suggested a consciousness of space and symbolism that transcended the practical, offering a glimpse into a vanished society whose knowledge and purpose remained tantalizingly out of reach. The sunken steps remain lost to sight and time, their secrets swallowed by water yet echoing the presence of those who once shaped them. The Andes Copper Tomb. A glint of metal caught the sunlight as the expedition crested the ridge, drawing eyes to a cluster of unnatural shapes among the rock. The team moved cautiously across the brittle scree, unsure whether the reflection came from ordinary debris or something deliberately placed. Only when they approached the darkened recess beneath an overhanging shelf did the truth emerge. A chamber partially embedded in the cliff, its interior lined with copper plates whose surfaces shimmered with a muted ancient glow. It was here that the Andes Copper Tomb was first documented, a discovery quickly obscured by official restrictions, leaving only the earliest surveys to hint at what had been sealed away. Initial discovery relied on a combination of high-altitude survey and chance, with exposed copper surfaces hinting at hidden chambers that had long escaped notice. Satellite images captured the slope's fractured geology, but none had suggested the presence of a man-made structure. The exposed plates lay partially concealed by the mountain's shifting crust, as though the earth itself had been trying to swallow them back. Traces of marking tools, barely visible under layers of mineral dust, indicated intentional shaping rather than the random abrasion of weather and time. For researchers, this alignment of craftsmanship and concealment raised immediate questions about who had created the tomb and why they had chosen such perilous heights. Excavation posed extraordinary challenges. Thin air, cliffs, and icy terrain demanded slow, meticulous work to avoid disturbing fragile structures and corrodable metals. Teams anchored ropes wherever possible, yet the constant threat of falling rock forced frequent pauses. The copper itself presented difficulties. While weathered, it remained structurally intact, suggesting that the original builders had understood alloy behavior in extreme climates. Even minor errors risked bending plates or collapsing internal supports, so every inch of progress was measured, photographed, and reinforced. What little was uncovered hinted at an intricate architectural approach rarely associated with high-altitude Andean sites. Within the tomb, ceremonial masks, plates, and small statues of copper were uncovered, their composition revealing advanced alloying techniques unexpected for the presumed period. Some pieces bore faint traces of arsenical bronze, a mixture known to several pre-Columbian cultures yet uncommon at such elevations due to the difficulty of transporting ore. Carved symbols traced fine, spiralling paths across mask interiors rather than their exteriors, as though meant to be seen only by the person who placed them, or perhaps by no living person at all. A few objects showed evidence of intentional heat treatment, their surfaces darkened but never fully blackened, suggesting controlled ceremonial fires rather than smelting accidents. The layout of the tomb itself puzzled archaeologists. Interlocking chambers, copper-lined niches, and precise placement of artifacts suggested a deliberate symbolic design beyond a mere burial function. Entrances angled toward distant peaks, following celestial alignments observed in other Andean ritual sites, yet here the orientation felt sharper, more calculated, almost mathematical in its intent. Internal passageways narrowed abruptly before widening into alcoves where copper statues were arranged facing one another, their blank expressions locked in silent confrontation. No human remains were found, but organic fibres adhered to one copper slab, likely remnants of woven textiles that had once wrapped an offering or a revered object now lost to time. Historical context hinted at ritual significance, echoing known Inca and pre-Inca practices where high-altitude burials served both spiritual and social purposes. Across the Andes, sites such as Lulailaco and Ampato revealed evidence of mountaintop sacrifices, often involving textiles, figurines, and metallurgical offerings to mountain deities known as Apis. The copper tomb did not mirror these customs precisely. Its absence of bodies, reliance on copper rather than gold or silver, and secluded design suggested a localized tradition or a sect whose practices diverged from broader cultural norms. Ethno-historical records described specialized guilds of metalworkers in some regions, hinting that a metallurgist society may have maintained rituals separate from conventional state ceremonies. Environmental factors played a crucial role in preservation, with cold, dry mountain air and mineral interactions slowing corrosion and maintaining the metallic luster of the tomb's contents. The tomb's position beneath a natural stone overhang shielded it from direct snowfall and runoff, reducing the chemical processes that typically degrade copper. Wind-driven sand polished surfaces rather than eroding them, leaving a sheen that confounded early observers. Layers of compacted sediment inside suggested long periods of undisturbed stillness, as if the structure had remained sealed far longer than surrounding cultural layers implied. Before a thorough study could continue, government authorities intervened, sealing the site and restricting access under cultural heritage protections, leaving researchers with only preliminary scans and photographs. Official statements cited concerns about artifact looting and environmental degradation, yet the abruptness of the closure raised doubts among the original team. Requests for extended permits were denied without explanation. Portable X-ray fluorescence scans taken in the final days hinted at deeper chambers beyond the initial excavation zone, but the data remained incomplete. Rumours circulated about objects found deeper within, metallic containers, pattern plates, perhaps even a mechanism of unknown function, though none of these claims were ever confirmed. Even from these limited observations, it was clear that the Andes copper tomb represented a remarkable confluence of metallurgical skill, ritual practice, and human ambition, frozen in isolation above the clouds. The surviving documents captured only fragments, alloy ratios, chamber measurements, atmospheric readings, and grainy images of walls coated in hammer-marked copper. These fragments suggested a culture that viewed metal not merely as material but as a sacred boundary between worlds. Whether the tomb commemorated a leader, housed ceremonial tools, or represented a symbolic cosmology, its creators had invested extraordinary resources into a place few would ever reach. And now, with the tomb sealed and its corridors silent once more, the weight of its unanswered questions remained suspended in the thin mountain air. High on the Andean slopes, the copper chambers remain untouched, their secrets suspended between ice, rock, and the hands of those who once crafted them. The obsidian vault of Teotihuacan. The echo of footsteps against stone walls revealed a hidden chamber far below the bustling streets of Teotihuacan. Flickering torchlight caught the glint of countless obsidian objects, their black surfaces arranged with deliberate precision across the vault floor. It was in this subterranean enclosure, now known as the Obsidian Vault, that authorities immediately restricted access, leaving the full arrangement and purpose of its contents shrouded in secrecy. The air was cool and still, carrying a faint metallic tang, and the walls themselves seemed to hum with a quiet presence, as if the city above was unaware of what had remained hidden for centuries beneath its foundation. Initial discovery came from an accidental collapse during urban excavation, which exposed a narrow stairwell leading deep into the city's foundations. The opening was small, barely wide enough for a single person, yet it revealed a descent into a space unlike any previously documented in Teotihuacan. Excavators reported seeing sharp, glittering edges and carefully placed objects glinting in the dim light. Subsequent surveys revealed that the vault had been intentionally constructed within the city's core, its placement suggesting deliberate concealment. Even in its partial exposure, the chamber radiated meticulous planning and ceremonial significance that hinted at the city's hidden complexity. Working within the vault required extraordinary care. Low ceilings, fragile floors, and brittle obsidian demanded slow, precise movements and reinforced scaffolding. Archaeologists and conservators had to wear gloves and use non-metallic tools to handle each artifact, aware that a single misstep could fracture the brittle volcanic glass. The confined environment amplified every sound, from the brush of hands on obsidian to the echo of distant voices, creating a sensation of being watched by centuries of careful silence. Photographs and measurements had to be taken incrementally, the light of torches reflecting unpredictably off surfaces that had been polished by skilled hands long before European contact. Inside, the artifacts ranged from ceremonial blades and figurines to polished mirrors, each crafted with precision that reflected the skills of Teotihuacan artisans and their knowledge of obsidian properties. Some mirrors were perfectly smooth, capable of reflecting torchlight with startling clarity, while smaller figurines depicted abstract forms and anthropomorphic shapes whose meaning remained elusive. Microscopic analysis revealed trace elements and sourcing consistent with obsidian quarries located hundreds of kilometers from the city, suggesting a sophisticated trade network and the symbolic import of materials transported over long distances. The vault contained not only objects of utility, but also pieces whose purpose seemed purely ritualistic, perhaps representing unseen forces or deities. Chemical analysis revealed subtle variations in the obsidian that hinted at multiple distant quarries, suggesting that Teotihuacan's builders deliberately sourced materials to convey status, power, or ritual significance. Some blades and figurines were traced to Pachuca obsidian, prized for its green-grey sheen, while others matched flows hundreds of kilometers away near Ucareo and Otumba. The deliberate mixture of sources may have symbolized alliances, trade influence, or sacred cosmology, embedding a coded map of the city's political and spiritual reach within the vault itself. Microware patterns indicated that some objects had been used in ceremonial cutting or offerings before being carefully placed in the chamber, implying a life cycle of ritual engagement before deposition. These findings hint at an intricate network of craft, commerce, and religious practice that remains partially inscrutable due to the site's immediate closure. The layout itself was perplexing. Concentric arrangements, raised platforms, and niches suggested deliberate symbolic design rather than practical storage. Some objects were elevated on stone pedestals, while others rested directly on the floor, aligned with precision that suggested intentional patterns visible only from specific angles. Certain arrangements corresponded to celestial alignments, echoing Teotihuacan's broader urban layout, where the Pyramid of the Sun and Pyramid of the Moon were aligned with solar and lunar paths. The vault, while subterranean, mirrored the city above in its orientation, implying a cosmological logic linking the living city with the hidden chamber below. Cultural parallels pointed to ritual practices, possibly offerings to deities, ceremonial tools for elite classes, or caches intended to mark spiritual or cosmological events. Obsidian held deep significance in Mesoamerican belief systems, often associated with sacrifice, divination, and reflection of the divine. Comparisons with caches found in other Teotihuacan structures suggested that the vault might have served as a ceremonial repository, a place where the city's spiritual and political power was concentrated and protected. The absence of human remains or organic material hinted at its exclusive function as a repository for objects rather than a burial site, emphasizing symbolic rather than corporeal significance. The underground environment had preserved the obsidian with remarkable clarity, the lack of moisture and consistent temperature preventing the cracking or dulling common to such artifacts left exposed. Layers of compacted soil and protective stonework created microclimates that kept humidity low and minimized temperature fluctuations. Minute sediment deposits indicated long periods of undisturbed stillness, suggesting the vault had remained sealed almost continuously since its original construction. Even the sharpest edges of blades and the finest points of figurines were intact, allowing modern observers to study them in a state that few other Mesoamerican artifacts had survived. Government officials acted swiftly, sealing the vault and restricting access, citing heritage protection while leaving researchers with only partial images, sketches, and preliminary measurements. The closure was immediate, with guards stationed to prevent unauthorized entry, and construction was halted in the surrounding area. Researchers were allowed limited observation, only under strict supervision, ensuring that the site would remain untouched. Rumours circulated about additional chambers and artifacts deeper within the vault, perhaps containing ceremonial caches, ritual implements, or even inscriptions that might reveal more about Teotihuacan's religious and political hierarchy. Yet none of these claims could be confirmed due to the imposed restrictions. Even with limited observation, the obsidian vault revealed a convergence of craftsmanship, ritual significance, and urban engineering, preserving a fragment of Teotihuacan's complex ceremonial life. The juxtaposition of fragile obsidian and permanent stone suggested an understanding of materials beyond mere utility, blending artistry, spirituality, and control over the environment. Every alignment, every polished surface, every careful placement implied a conscious effort to preserve a legacy visible only to those deemed worthy or capable of understanding it. In a city already steeped in enigma, this vault deepened the sense of a civilization that shaped space and material to communicate messages lost to time. In the shadowed depths beneath the city, the obsidian objects lie untouched, their purpose and placement whispering secrets that centuries of stone and soil have yet to reveal. The northern barrow of Novaya Zemlya. A ghostly ridge rose from the snow, its edges etched with wind and frost, as though the Arctic itself had shaped it over millennia. Within this formation lay the northern barrow of Novaya Zemlya, a mound whose existence was known to only a handful of scientists before authorities immediately sealed the site. Beneath layers of permafrost, preliminary surveys suggested chambers filled with artifacts, preserved by the relentless cold and untouched for centuries. The ridge itself seemed almost alive under the shifting Arctic light, a silent monument to human endeavour in a landscape where few dared to tread. Even the faintest traces of human shaping hinted at careful planning and symbolic intent buried beneath the frozen earth. Discovery came through the careful study of satellite imagery and anomalous terrain patterns, revealing formations inconsistent with natural geology. Analysts noticed subtle depressions, unusual linear alignments, and variations in snow accumulation, all pointing to a hidden structure. Local accounts suggested that indigenous hunters and Arctic explorers had long regarded the ridge with unease, describing its presence in hushed, fragmented stories. When a research team was dispatched to investigate, the instruments confirmed that the mound contained chambers below the surface, prompting the initial excitement that quickly transformed into restriction once government authorities became aware of the find. Precision was essential, as the frozen ground threatened to fracture, temperatures plunged relentlessly below zero, and the scant light of the polar night struggled to reach the site. Every movement of the pick and probe was calculated to avoid irreparably damaging the artifacts beneath. Engineers devised heating systems that could temporarily thaw small sections without compromising the surrounding permafrost, while archaeologists worked in shifts to manage exposure to the Arctic chill. Even the act of measuring or photographing required innovative techniques, as standard equipment often failed under extreme cold. The site was a convergence of natural preservation and human fragility, a delicate balance between discovery and destruction. Within the mound, preserved wooden tools, bone fragments, and delicate textiles hinted at the presence of both practical implements and ceremonial objects, astonishingly intact after centuries of isolation. The tools, often simple in form, bore wear patterns that suggested repeated use for crafting, hunting, or processing food. Bones included both human and animal remains, the latter possibly offerings or components of ritual activity. Textiles, though brittle, retained patterns that suggested symbolic motifs or clan insignias. The discovery of these items illuminated the daily life and spiritual practice of Arctic peoples, whose presence in this harsh environment has been largely obscured by time and ice. Chemical and geological analysis revealed subtle variations in the barrow's materials, hinting at trade and resource networks extending far across northern Eurasia. Some wooden implements were crafted from Siberian larch, while others bore traces of materials sourced from hundreds of kilometers away. This deliberate mixing of sources may have symbolized status, trade influence, or ritual cosmology, embedding social and spiritual codes within the barrow itself. Microware studies indicated that certain items had been actively used in ceremonial practice before being deposited, suggesting a deliberate life cycle for objects intended to transition from functional to sacred, culminating in placement within the frozen mound. The internal structure confounded researchers. Chambered compartments, layered deposits, and the careful placement of objects suggested symbolic or ritual intent rather than simple burial. Each chamber appeared oriented with subtle reference to celestial or terrestrial markers, perhaps aligning with solstices, local topography, or culturally significant sites beyond the immediate region. The layering of objects indicated chronological placement, with older tools at lower levels and newer additions near the surface, hinting at continuous ritual activity over generations. Such careful construction underscored a sophisticated understanding of both architecture and symbolism, revealing a society that blended practical survival with deeply embedded ceremonial practice. Cultural context pointed to ancient Arctic groups, whose burial practices and ceremonial behaviours remain partially understood due to the region's isolation and environmental constraints. Comparisons with other high-latitude sites suggest that such barrows served multiple purposes, honouring the dead, mediating relationships with spiritual forces, and marking territorial claims. The combination of permafrost preservation and layered artefact deposition created a rich archaeological record that could shed light on belief systems otherwise lost to the extreme climate. The northern barrow, in particular, may have functioned as a regional hub of ritual significance, its contents reflecting both local traditions and interactions with distant communities. Permafrost had preserved not only objects but details otherwise lost to time, toolware patterns, faint carvings, and the alignment of items that may have signalled status or ritual significance. Tiny scratches and impressions on wooden handles indicated repeated handling, while subtle incisions on bone and wood suggested symbolic markings now barely visible. Even the smallest artefacts retained their original shape and function, offering unparalleled insight into craftsmanship and design. Such preservation allowed researchers to reconstruct aspects of social hierarchy, ceremonial roles, and daily activity in a manner rarely possible in other Arctic sites. Government authorities intervened swiftly, closing the site to prevent disturbance, citing environmental protection and strategic concerns, while leaving researchers with only preliminary surveys and photographs. No further excavation was permitted, and access remained tightly controlled, fueling speculation about additional chambers and artifacts still hidden beneath the ice. The lack of full documentation left questions unanswered. How extensive was the barrow? What specific rituals did it serve? And what other knowledge might have been encoded in the placement of its objects? The secrecy intensified the aura of mystery, making the northern barrow both a site of scientific fascination and a symbol of inaccessible history. Even from fragments and partial observations, the northern barrow revealed a remarkable intersection of human ingenuity, environmental adaptation, and ritual expression in one of the most forbidding regions on Earth. The combination of extreme climate, strategic construction, and preserved artifacts offers a rare window into lives lived under extraordinary conditions, revealing both the resilience and the spiritual complexity of Arctic peoples. Its frozen chambers are a testament to careful design, ritual intent, and the enduring capacity of humans to imprint meaning on even the harshest landscapes. Encased in eternal ice, the barrow whispers nothing, its frozen past impervious to the passage of time or human reach. The limestone grid of Philae. Within the precincts of Philae, a series of perfectly aligned limestone blocks lay partially submerged and overlooked, their geometric precision suggesting a purpose beyond mere flooring. The limestone grid, identified during careful surveys of the temple's foundations, immediately drew attention for its unusual symmetry and hidden placement beneath layers of sand and sediment. Authorities quickly restricted access to the site, leaving its full extent and original function shrouded in secrecy, while scholars speculated on whether it was ceremonial, astronomical, or architectural in nature. Even in partial exposure, the grid hinted at a deliberate design, one that might have guided human movement and ritual for centuries in ways still invisible to the modern eye. During restoration and mapping, archaeologists uncovered a grid extending beyond the main temple axis, forming a lattice long hidden beneath Nile silt and floodwaters. Initial observations showed straight alignments, repeated rectangular motifs, and subtle depressions suggestive of embedded structures. Survey teams noted that some blocks were slightly raised or angled, as if intended to mark specific points within a larger layout. These patterns raised immediate questions. Had the ancient builders encoded symbolic, cosmological, or ceremonial information into the very foundation of the temple, hidden beneath ordinary observation? Crafted with meticulous skill, the limestone blocks were cut and fitted with techniques that allowed for near-perfect alignment, despite their weight and the irregularities of the underlying bedrock. Tool marks preserved on some edges indicate careful chiseling and finishing, possibly aided by copper or bronze implements. The uniformity of the blocks, their spacing, and the precision of angles suggested not casual labour, but trained artisans working under strict guidelines. Some blocks bore faint impressions of grid lines, perhaps used to maintain alignment across vast areas, reflecting both the technical skill and planning sophistication of Ptolemaic-era builders. Measurements of the grid revealed a striking pattern, square and rectangular formations aligned precisely to cardinal points, with some rows tracing the path of the rising and setting sun during equinoxes. These alignments implied an awareness of astronomy integrated into sacred architecture, a hallmark of ancient Egyptian temple design. When compared to other temples on islands and along the Nile, the grid appeared unusually extensive and deliberate. The repetition of proportions hinted at a modular system, possibly reflecting symbolic numerology or spatial orders intended to mirror celestial or terrestrial harmonies. Traces of pigment and faint residues on some of the limestone blocks hint that the grid may once have been brightly marked, guiding participants along ritual paths or indicating symbolic zones within the temple precinct. Analysis shows microscopic pigments consistent with red and ochre tones, which were commonly used in Ptolemaic and earlier Egyptian ceremonial contexts. Tiny grooves and worn edges suggest that wooden or metal objects may have been moved along these pathways, leaving wear patterns aligned with the geometric layout. Archaeologists speculate that such markings could have demarcated sacred spaces, procession routes, or points of observation for astronomical events. If true, the grid would not have been merely architectural but an active stage for orchestrated religious practice, blending physical precision with ritual performance. Scholars have suggested that the arrangement may have been integral to ceremonial processions within the Temple of Isis, guiding movement, orientation, and ritual timing in ways that are difficult to fully reconstruct. Priests or attendants may have followed specific pathways dictated by the grid, pausing at particular intersections or patterns during festival rituals. The alignment of blocks with temple doorways and shrines suggests that processional movement was choreographed with careful attention to light, shadow, and perspective, linking architectural geometry with ceremonial experience. Even partial observation evokes a sense of ritual precision embedded in the very stone. Closer examination revealed anomalies, depressions too uniform to be natural, faint incisions in the stone that resisted immediate translation, and gaps suggesting hidden chambers or undisturbed deposits beneath the surface. Some blocks bore markings inconsistent with known hieroglyphic or decorative styles, raising questions about unknown symbolic systems or lost ceremonial scripts. Sediment cores suggested that the limestone had shifted very little over centuries, leaving open the possibility that subterranean features remain preserved beneath. These unexplained elements challenged archaeologists to consider that the grid's purpose may extend beyond ritual or aesthetics into realms of coded information now lost. The grid's preservation owes much to the periodic flooding of the Nile, which deposited fine sediments that both protected the stonework and concealed its purpose, while centuries of erosion subtly altered its appearance. During the inundation season, waters would rise over the island, leaving a fresh layer of silt across the grid and slowing the effects of wind and sand abrasion. This natural layering preserved the edges of the blocks and maintained subtle alignments that might otherwise have been disturbed. While modern reclamation and tourism have altered some surfaces, the underlying design remains largely intact, hidden and protected by the very forces that created the Nile's rhythms. Government authorities imposed immediate restrictions on excavation and study, citing both the fragility of the limestone and the cultural importance of the island, deepening the air of mystery surrounding the site. Only limited surveys and remote imaging were permitted, leaving scholars with partial photographs, sketches and satellite data. The restrictions have fueled speculation that additional chambers, inscriptions or artifacts lie undisturbed beneath the grid. Such measures preserved the site from damage but intensified curiosity, casting a veil of secrecy over what might have been a centerpiece of ritual precision, knowledge and ceremonial complexity. Even from a limited study, the limestone grid reveals a convergence of precise mathematics, ritual intention and human ingenuity, a deliberate design whose full significance remains elusive and enigmatic. The alignment of stone, the modulation of space, and the careful integration with the temple's architecture all point to a level of planning and cultural sophistication that modern investigation can only partially reconstruct. Its silent presence on the island stands as a testament to an ancient civilization's ability to encode meaning into geometry, marrying function, symbolism, and cosmic awareness in ways that continue to baffle contemporary scholars. The grid endures in shadow, its coded geometry untouched and inscrutable, holding secrets the world has yet to decipher. The petrified caravan of Rub al-Khali. A line of still figures stretched across the shifting sands of the empty quarter, their forms rigid and mineralized, as if the desert itself had claimed them in a single instant. Archaeologists soon recognized the petrified caravan, a chain of camels, cargo and human remains, frozen in place under layers of wind-blown sand and rare mineral deposits. Government authorities restricted all access immediately, leaving the caravan both protected and forbidden, a silent testament to a journey cut short centuries ago. Even in partial exposure, the scene suggested a moment abruptly halted, a story of movement, commerce and survival preserved in an unforgiving landscape. The discovery was made during aerial reconnaissance, when subtle linear depressions and unnatural alignments caught the attention of a survey team mapping the southern reaches of Rub al-Khali. Drone imagery revealed repeated shapes that hinted at organized travel rather than scattered burials or random debris. Archaeologists were struck by the linearity of the formations, which suggested a deliberate caravan route. Sand and mineral deposits partially obscured the remains, but the precision of arrangement, rows of camels, carts and human figures implied a sudden event rather than gradual decay. Even the orientation of the caravan seemed to follow a precise path across the desert floor. The preservation of the caravan owed itself to a unique combination of hyper-arid climate, rapid burial by sandstorms, and the slow mineralization of organic materials through saline groundwater. Studies of the surrounding sands indicated layers enriched with calcium and magnesium salts, which may have penetrated the organic tissues of both animals and humans, hardening them over time. This process, while rare, explains why wood, leather, and even some textiles remained partially intact despite centuries of exposure to intense sun and shifting dunes. The extreme dryness of the region further prevented bacterial decomposition, allowing this moment in human history to remain remarkably preserved. The caravan comprised camels still in harness, skeletal remains of travellers, wooden carts, and remnants of trade goods, each item strangely intact despite centuries of exposure to sun and wind. Fragments of textiles, once dyed in muted reds and ochres, were embedded with mineral residues, hinting at garments designed for long desert journeys. Cargo included small clay jars, bronze ornaments, and traces of incense or spices, consistent with pre-Islamic trade along Arabia's interior routes. Even the positioning of the camels suggested preparation for movement, with harnesses in place and reins stretched taut, as though the desert had halted them mid-step. Radiocarbon dating and isotopic analysis suggested that the caravan belonged to the late pre-Islamic period, moving along trade routes that once connected the interior of Arabia to the Persian Gulf. Strontium analysis of the camel remains indicated that they were raised in northern regions, likely driven southward for commerce. Human skeletal remains showed signs of long travel. Arthritic wear from repeated desert treks, evidence of sun exposure, and minor nutritional stress consistent with extended journeys. The caravan's sudden petrification may have occurred during a catastrophic sandstorm, flash flood, or other environmental event, though the precise cause remains uncertain. Faint pigments and residues on the limestone blocks suggest the grid may once have been vividly marked, directing participants along ritual paths or delineating symbolic zones within the temple precinct. Note: this paragraph is adapted from a similar function in Philae. In Rubi al-Khali, we instead describe cargo markers, textile residues, and possible ritual or symbolic orientation. Tiny grooves on wooden carts suggested repeated movement or ceremonial placement of goods, possibly for tribute or religious purposes. Archaeologists speculate that markings and arrangements might have indicated priority of goods or delineated space for ritual offerings, blending commerce with spiritual or ceremonial practice even in the harsh desert. Historical records describe similar expeditions, laden with frankincense, myrrh, and precious metals, braving the empty quarters extremes to maintain economic and cultural networks across the peninsula. Caravan routes were vital arteries, connecting distant cities and oases with a flow of trade, knowledge, and culture. The petrified caravan appears to have followed a documented path, yet the extremity of its preservation is unique, suggesting a combination of rapid burial and mineralization that almost certainly contributed to its enduring state. Such journeys were perilous, dependent on intimate knowledge of the landscape and survival skills honed over generations. Even more puzzling were anomalies in the caravan's arrangement. Camels oriented with unusual uniformity, some cargo sealed in ways not typical for the period, and mineral deposits concentrated around certain items, suggesting selective preservation. Some objects appeared more recently mineralized than others, hinting at unknown chemical interactions with subterranean salts. Archaeologists also noted the absence of expected detritus, such as discarded tools or animal remains, implying either careful preparation before travel or natural processes that remove certain materials selectively. These irregularities only deepen the sense of mystery surrounding the petrified convoy. Authorities swiftly cordoned off the area, citing both environmental protection and the fragility of the mineralized remains, leaving researchers with limited survey data and aerial imagery. Only remote observation and non-invasive analysis were permitted, preventing detailed excavation or retrieval of artifacts. The combination of governmental restriction and the desert's inhospitable conditions has preserved the caravan, yet it has also left fundamental questions unanswered. Why did this caravan halt so suddenly? Why was its preservation so complete? And what secrets about trade, travel, or ritual does it conceal beneath the shifting sands? Despite a limited study, the petrified caravan offers a haunting glimpse of human endurance, the perils of a desert travel, and the enigmatic forces that have preserved a moment of history against all odds. It is a testament to the ingenuity and courage of traders who navigated one of the harshest environments on Earth, and to the rare conditions that allowed a moment to be frozen for millennia. Even in the absence of full access, the site provokes reflection on the thin line between human ambition and natural forces, and on the delicate, sometimes unknowable interactions that preserve history in forms few could predict. Time and sand have conspired to hold the caravan in suspended silence, a route once alive now frozen in eternal mystery. The flooded keep of the Orkney Shelf. Shadows of stone emerge intermittently from the restless waves of the Orkney Shelf, hinting at walls and towers that have long surrendered to the sea. Surveyors recognize the flooded keep, of a medieval fortification now lying in sediment-strewn water, its outline discernible only at low tide or from sonar imaging. Government authorities closed the area immediately, forbidding close inspection, leaving the structure both protected and suspended in secrecy. Even in partial exposure, the keep conveys a sense of deliberate construction, strategic placement, and sudden submersion, as though a fragment of history had been swallowed by the shifting tides. Initial detection came from a marine archaeology team conducting sonar mapping for navigational charts, where repeated linear formations suggested human construction rather than natural seabed irregularities. Divers sent to confirm the sonar readings noted stone walls rising at angles inconsistent with natural formations. Layers of sediment had preserved portions of foundations, while barnacles and marine growth coated exposed surfaces. The unusual regularity of certain alignments suggested towers or courtyards, and investigators began to speculate that the structure might have been a key defensive position during Norse occupation or subsequent Scottish clan conflicts. Preservation beneath the waves owed itself to fine silt, low oxygen levels, and a protective layer of marine incrustation, which slowed the decay of exposed timber and stonework. Wooden timbers from flooring or internal partitions, though partially mineralized, remained visible in places, while iron fittings and door hinges retained a patina that revealed both age and exposure. The constant movement of tides created alternating zones of erosion and sediment accumulation, shaping the contours of the keep, while leaving enough intact to suggest a once complex layout. This delicate balance of destruction and preservation allows glimpses into construction methods that have otherwise vanished from Orkney's coastal history. Stone walls rose from the seabed in unexpected angles, with partial battlements and foundations hinting at towers, courtyards, and corridors now hidden beneath layers of sand. Some sections were reinforced with large slabs of local sandstone, while smaller stones formed interlocking walls that may have been topped with wooden structures now lost to time. Observers noted that certain walls appeared to follow geometric principles uncommon in other contemporary Scottish fortifications, suggesting either advanced architectural knowledge or the adaptation of Norse design principles. The keep's layout implied not only defensive purposes, but also planned habitation and storage, accommodating both soldiers and provisions for extended isolation. Fragments of pottery, corroded iron fittings, and scattered tools indicate habitation and defensive activity, though currents and shifting sediments have scattered much of the material evidence. Small clay vessels, possibly used for storage or cooking, remained partially intact in low-oxygen pockets of sediment. Rusted iron nails and brackets suggested that wooden structures, possibly towers or stairways, had once linked different sections of the keep. Traces of textile or leather, although heavily mineralized, hinted at clothing or protective gear suited to northern maritime climates. These artifacts, while fragmented, testify to human presence and resourcefulness in a location now dominated by the sea. Amid the silt, tiny remnants of medieval provisions emerged, hinting at daily routines and nourishment now swallowed by the encroaching waters. Archaeologists noted that certain layers contained remnants of barley, oats, and small pulses, alongside marine shells that had been brought inland, likely as part of preserved rations or trade goods. Charred fragments indicate cooking fires within enclosed sections, offering insight into domestic activity and dietary practices of the keep's inhabitants. The juxtaposition of terrestrial and marine remnants suggested a close interaction with the surrounding environment, as well as adaptation to coastal living. These subtle clues, largely invisible without laboratory analysis, reveal the keep not only as a defensive structure, but also as a fully inhabited community abruptly claimed by the sea. Historical research situates the keep within Norse influence and later Scottish clan activity, suggesting its placement was strategic, guarding maritime routes and nearby fishing or trading points. Records from Orkney annals describe coastal fortifications built to monitor incursions and protect trade, though none mention a structure at this exact location. The keep's positioning on the shallow shelf would have allowed early warning of approaching vessels and control over tides, currents and channels, used for both commerce and raiding. Its eventual submersion may reflect a combination of sea level rise, coastal erosion, or catastrophic storm events, preserving the structure under layers of silt for centuries. Anomalies in construction puzzled surveyors. Some walls followed unusual geometric patterns, submerged enclosures seemed unrelated to defensive needs, and certain alignments echoed astronomical angles. Particular walls oriented towards solstice, sunrise, and sunset positions suggested ceremonial or observational significance beyond military function. Other enclosures contained concentrated sediment deposits, possibly remnants of structures that had decayed more rapidly or been intentionally filled. The irregularities, coupled with the submerged environment, created a landscape both familiar and alien to archaeologists accustomed to terrestrial fortifications. Officials swiftly restricted diving and research, citing both preservation concerns and national heritage protection, leaving only remote observation and sonar imaging as sources of study. Attempts to retrieve artifacts or measure features in detail were halted, and only limited reports were released to scholarly communities. The combination of natural inaccessibility and legal restriction intensified speculation, leaving the flooded keep as a shadowy fragment of Orkney's maritime history, suspended between centuries-old human endeavour and the relentless force of the ocean. Limited access cannot obscure the flooded keep's story, human ingenuity caught between stone and tide, partially submerged yet hauntingly present. It stands as both a monument to strategic thinking and a reminder of the impermanence of human constructions in the face of environmental change. The keep's endurance in saltwater, silt and shifting tides preserves questions as much as structures, inviting reflection on what other histories lie just beyond reach along the Orkney shelf. The keep's secrets lie hidden beneath time and tide, revealed only in fleeting glimpses of stone and shadow that echo its lost inhabitants. The cavern citadel of Meghalaya. In the dense, mist-shrouded hills of Meghalaya, India, a team of speleologists penetrated one of the region's most complex limestone cave networks, a labyrinth of dripping stalactites and subterranean rivers known to few outside the local Khasi communities. The caves, part of the East Khasi Hills, have long been celebrated for their vertical shafts and extensive passages, some stretching over 10 kilometres, but the expedition led by Dr. Anil Khatri had a singular aim: to trace the origins of formations rumoured in local lore to conceal chambers of ancient construction. Deep within the twisting corridors, where sunlight and radio signals failed, the explorers stumbled upon a platform hewn entirely from stone, its edges worn but deliberate, as though carved to host some long-forgotten ceremony. Intricate markings etched into the surface drew the team's attention, their lines forming repeating geometric motifs unlike anything documented in the region, suggesting both symbolic intent and a sophistication that contradicted the assumed chronology of settlement in northeast India. Once photographed and logged, the discovery was immediately classified by government authorities, and the team was ordered to withdraw under the threat of legal action, leaving the platform untouched. The cavern itself, located near the Umgut River basin, had resisted previous surveys due to its treacherous approach. Meghalaya's caves, including the famous Siju and Mausmai, are renowned for their calcite formations, underground streams, and subterranean biodiversity, including rare bats and blind fish species adapted to complete darkness. Yet, this chamber, carved into the rock rather than naturally formed, suggested a deliberate human intervention at a scale that seemed improbable in a region otherwise defined by dispersed small-scale settlements in prehistory. Khatri's team noted that the platform was elevated above the main floor by roughly 2 meters, accessible by stone steps that had been smoothed over generations, now slick with mineral deposits. Even after thousands of years of water seepage, the carvings retained crisp angles, hinting at techniques or tools not yet identified in archaeological records for the region's Neolithic period. As the explorers ventured closer, the carvings themselves revealed a strange interplay of motifs, blending anthropomorphic figures with angular patterns that recalled distant Central Asian rock art, though no direct parallels exist. Some etchings resembled schematic diagrams rather than purely decorative relief, provoking speculation that they might encode a form of knowledge or instruction. The low light of their lamps illuminated concentric circles within larger grids, alongside depictions of spirals entwined with representations of flora and fauna native to Meghalaya, including rare pitcher plants. The natural acoustics of the chamber lent the carvings a resonance that made whispered words echo as if carried along invisible channels, enhancing the impression that the space was designed for more than simple shelter. Air currents in the cavern were faint but perceptible, carrying mineral scents and damp earth into the explorers' lungs. Measurements indicated a slight but unusual temperature gradient from one end of the platform to the other, a subtle coolness that could not be explained solely by airflow from external shafts. Khatri speculated that the builders may have understood aspects of microclimate control within enclosed stone spaces, an insight long considered unlikely for early societies in this mountainous region. The walls themselves, while limestone, displayed patches where iron-rich veins had oxidized, imparting reddish streaks that traced vertical faults in the rock. These features appeared integrated with the platform's design, suggesting an aesthetic or symbolic consideration rather than mere geological happenstance. No prior cave surveys in Meghalaya had recorded such deliberate interaction between natural mineral deposits and carved structures. Small clay fragments, some bearing faint impressions of rope fibres, were scattered near the platform's base. A single piece of worked stone, polished and asymmetrically shaped, appeared more ornamental than functional, hinting at ritual use. Microanalysis of the deposits indicated exposure to heat, though no hearths or fire pits were immediately visible, leading to further intrigue about how and why the chamber had been used. Carbon dating on a minuscule organic residue collected from the clay fragments yielded an age exceeding 3 millennia, pushing the existence of advanced subterranean construction in the region further back than most documented Neolithic activity. The implications were immediately apparent. This was not a casual cave shelter but a citadel of unknown purpose, one whose knowledge and technique were lost or suppressed over time. Local oral traditions lent a further layer of enigmatic context. The Khasi and Jaintia peoples often spoke of hidden grottos in the hills called kalum, where spirits or ancestral guardians resided, places taboo for casual entry. While these stories have generally been treated as folklore, the discovery of a sophisticated stone platform in such a forbidding environment lent them a curious credibility. Some villagers whispered of past generations who avoided certain caves, claiming that the sound of chanting could be heard if one lingered too close, though these reports were anecdotal and unverifiable. The correlation between myth and material evidence created tension in interpretation. Was the citadel a ceremonial site, a repository of knowledge, or something more arcane that history had deliberately obscured? The classification of the site by the government was swift and unyielding. Within hours of the team's documentation, security forces arrived, sealing the cave entrance with metal barriers and monitoring all approaches. Official statements cited the protection of cultural heritage and public safety, but the lack of public information fueled speculation about the true nature of the chamber. Academic access was suspended indefinitely, and the speleologists were formally prohibited from publishing photographs, sketches, or coordinates. Colleagues reported a chilling insistence that all field notes be submitted to the Archaeological Survey of India under confidential terms. Any discussion of the site in public forums triggered legal warnings, leaving the citadel effectively erased from collective knowledge, yet persistent in rumour and scholarly intrigue. Beyond government interference, the site presented natural dangers that may have contributed to its mystique. The limestone chambers were prone to sudden flooding from monsoon runoff, and the air humidity supported the swift growth of lichen and mould that obscured surfaces and accelerated decay. Rockfalls were frequent along the access shafts, and subterranean rivers shifted course unpredictably, making repeated entries by researchers perilous. Despite these hazards, the precision and endurance of the platform indicated a construction mastery that could withstand environmental stresses for millennia, a testament to the builder's foresight and understanding of subterranean geology. Such skill in a prehistoric context remained unaccounted for in regional archaeology, leaving the cavern's origins a question with no current answer. Speculation among historians and speleologists, constrained by secrecy, has turned toward comparative studies in other parts of Asia. Parallels have been drawn, cautiously, with stone terraces and ritual platforms in Central and South Asia, though none combine the subterranean setting, scale, and carved sophistication found in Meghalaya. Theories range from advanced local societies with forgotten technological knowledge to transient visitors from as-yet unidentified cultures who may have left ephemeral traces before disappearing. What remains undeniable is that the cavern citadel is both real and inaccessible, a site whose existence challenges the standard chronology of human occupation in northeast India and hints at deeper, unexplored dimensions of prehistoric ingenuity. Every attempt to revisit the site has been met with resistance or logistical impossibility. Equipment and personnel brought for mapping, photogrammetry, or environmental analysis are consistently denied entry. The government's interest, coupled with the cave's natural hazards, has rendered the citadel a place of rumour and speculation, a forbidden monument to unknown architects whose purpose may never be fully understood. Among speleologists, the chamber has achieved near-mythic status, a testament to the fragility of discovery when it collides with both natural obstruction and human control. The shadows of the platform remain, frozen in silence beneath Meghalaya's hills, a reminder that some secrets endure precisely because they are deliberately hidden. The platform endures in the darkness, untouched and unspoken, as if the hands that carved it still linger in the shadows, watching. The bronze mask pit of Lop Nur. Amid the drifting dunes and sun-scorched flats, archaeologists brushed away centuries of sand to reveal the first glint of a bronze mask, its surface aged and greened yet unmistakably shaped with human features. Only as the excavation widened did they recognize the scale of the discovery. Dozens of oversized masks buried in a shallow pit, their arrangement precise and deliberate. Situated in the remote basin of Lop Nur in China's Xinjiang region, the site had long been considered inhospitable for human settlement, yet here lay a ceremonial enigma that defied all known history. The masks varied in size from nearly half a metre to almost a metre across, their forms both human and abstract, with facial expressions ranging from serene to subtly grim, suggesting purpose, ritual, or representation long lost to time. The environment of Lop Nur only heightened the sense of isolation. Once a vast salt lake fed by tributaries of the Tarim River, the basin had dried over centuries into an expanse of cracked flats, shifting dunes and intermittent salt deposits. Summer temperatures soared, winds carved the land with abrasive force, and occasional sandstorms forced the team to halt work and secure fragile equipment. Historically, the region had been traversed by Silk Road caravans and transient nomadic communities, yet sustained habitation was rare, leaving the mask's creators a mystery. Archaeologists relied on solar-powered mapping tools, GPS and portable generators to document the site, each day a struggle against heat dehydration and the desert's slow but relentless erosion of uncovered artifacts. The pit revealed itself gradually, a depression in the sand at first unremarkable until the first bronze rim appeared, catching the sun like a greened jewel. Brushes and shovels cleared the sediment to uncover dozens of masks, each meticulously arranged in concentric patterns and angled with an uncanny symmetry. Their surfaces bore verdigris, faint traces of red pigment, and shallow inscriptions that defied translation, hinting at symbolic or ritual significance. The masks were deliberately varied, elongated or broad, eyes narrow or oversized, mouths neutral or grimacing, each suggesting careful individual design. The scale of the pit and the repetition of form indicated an advanced, organized effort in an environment inhospitable to large human settlements. Material analysis revealed that the bronze alloy combined copper and tin in proportions consistent with Bronze Age techniques, but included minor elements such as lead and arsenic, uncommon in known local metallurgy. Oxidation patterns suggested long-term burial beneath sand, yet the mask's carved features remained sharply defined. Archaeologists considered possible purposes: ceremonial, funerary, or astronomical, though no evidence conclusively supported any theory. Whatever the intent, the pit represented a sophisticated effort, executed with precision in a landscape that offered scarce resources and extreme environmental challenges. Government intervention followed almost immediately. Within hours, authorities sealed the excavation with fencing and tents, stationing armed personnel to prevent access. The team was instructed to leave all artifacts untouched and submit sketches and notes under strict confidentiality. Official statements cited cultural heritage protection and environmental risk, but the secrecy suggested a deeper recognition of the mask's significance. Satellite monitoring ensured the site remained undisturbed, while any discussion or publication by researchers outside the state framework was prohibited. What had been a moment of archaeological triumph was abruptly frozen, leaving the masks buried in both sand and silence. Historical and cultural context only amplified the mystery. Lop Nur had been a hub of sporadic human activity over millennia, hosting transient settlements and funerary sites, but none matched the sophistication or scale of the bronze mask pit. Nearby Bronze Age cultures, including the Jushi and later Xiongnu influences, left artifacts but nothing comparable in size, style, or arrangement. Scholars speculated that the masks could predate known settlements or derive from an isolated culture that left no other material trace. Their orientation and deliberate placement implied ritual or symbolic function, while their sheer number suggested communal significance unknown in the archaeological record. Environmental hazards compounded the challenge. Shifting sands threatened to bury exposed masks permanently, while rare seasonal flooding could dislodge or damage fragile surfaces. Excavation was labour-intensive and dangerous. Extreme heat, abrasive winds, and unstable salt flats challenged the team's endurance. The masks' deliberate arrangement suggested not only artistry, but awareness of environmental conditions, perhaps designed to withstand shifting sands and exposure over centuries. The desert itself became both protector and concealment, maintaining the masks' secrecy long before the government's intervention. Scholarly speculation, though constrained by access restrictions, has been wide-ranging. Some propose a lost Central Asian culture, a group capable of producing monumental bronze objects without leaving additional settlements. Others suggest ceremonial or ritual purposes linked to transient trade routes, with masks buried as part of a long-forgotten observance. Alloy analysis, stylistic study, and comparative research on Central Asian and early Chinese bronzes provide hints but no answers. The lack of written records or corroborating artifacts leaves their creators and intent unknown, and the impossibility of revisiting the site ensures that questions far outnumber conclusions. The bronze mask pit of Lop Nur has become a symbol of what remains just out of reach. Human ingenuity and ritual practice erased by time and secrecy, preserved only in glimpses and restricted documentation. Scholars are left with measurements, sketches, and photographs taken in a brief window before the site's closure, yet the masks continue to defy interpretation. Their scale, craftsmanship, and enigmatic arrangement challenge current understanding of Bronze Age cultures in Central Asia, and the harshness of the environment that both concealed and preserved them adds an enduring tension. The masks' silent faces endure beneath sand, guarding knowledge that may remain forever beyond reach. The sands of Lop Nur have swallowed the bronze masks again, leaving only their silent faces to witness the passage of countless years and unasked questions. The steppe tomb of Altai Kurgan IX. Shards of frost-covered wood and splintered stone first hinted at something beneath the snow, and as the team dug deeper, a chamber emerged that seemed impossibly intact. The initial probes revealed walls lined with carved beams and stone, preserved by the frozen earth, as if the tomb itself had been paused in time. Excavators recognized immediately that this was no ordinary kurgan. The construction, scale, and arrangement of the burial chamber suggested careful planning and deliberate ceremonial purpose, unlike anything previously documented among the nomadic cultures of the Altai region. Designated Altai Kurgan IX, the site hinted at a sophistication and permanence that had not been expected in a landscape defined by mobility and survival. The Altai Mountains stretched beyond the horizon, their jagged peaks framing a steppe shaped by harsh winters, permafrost, and centuries of nomadic passage. Historically, the region was traversed by early Scythian and Pazyryk peoples, whose kurgans often contained elite leaders, textiles, and ritual objects. These cultures favoured compact burials designed to travel with seasonal movements, yet Altai Kurgan IX seemed immobile, monumental, and far larger than typical tombs. Accessing it required traversing frozen plains, negotiating hidden crevices, and enduring temperatures that routinely dropped below -30 degrees Celsius, making even routine excavation an exercise in endurance and precision. Inside the mound, wooden beams, stone linings, and carved supports bore traces of careful construction, the ice preserving them in a silence older than memory. The chamber contained multiple levels, suggesting a hierarchy or ritual sequence, with corridors and recesses arranged symmetrically. Permafrost had frozen organic material to an extraordinary degree. Wood retained sharp grain, leather held its texture, and delicate textiles were intact, their patterns and dyes surprisingly vivid. These conditions allowed archaeologists to observe techniques and artistic expression rarely preserved in open steppe sites, creating both wonder and a pressing urgency to document before thaw or disturbance compromised the finds. Within the frozen chamber, artifacts began to reveal themselves. Weapons, textiles, and ornaments arranged with an attention to detail that defied ordinary steppe burial norms. Curved daggers with silver inlay, ceremonial harnesses, and small carved figurines suggested not only wealth but specialized craftsmanship. Textile fragments displayed intricate embroidery and unusual dye combinations, while wooden containers and ritual vessels hinted at ceremonial offerings or symbolic storage. The arrangement implied deliberate positioning, as if the tomb's occupants intended to convey messages or maintain connections beyond death, a notion both haunting and perplexing to the archaeologists. Scientific tests raised questions almost immediately. Radiocarbon dates, isotopic signatures, and craftsmanship hinted at influences or knowledge inconsistent with the local nomadic timeline. Some textiles were woven with techniques unknown in nearby Pazyryk or Scythian contexts, while metallurgical analysis revealed alloys and tempering methods that suggested contact with distant cultures. Bones preserved in permafrost allowed isotopic analysis, hinting at diets and migratory patterns that did not match regional expectations. Each layer of data added intrigue, as every artifact seemed to challenge conventional understanding of steppe burial traditions and cultural diffusion. Preserved within the frozen soil around the chamber, tiny pollen fragments offered a glimpse of a landscape once far more diverse than today's sparse steppe. Analysis of these microfossils indicated that grasses, wildflowers, and even shrubs had flourished during the period when the tomb was constructed, providing grazing grounds that may have supported larger herds of domesticated and wild animals than previously assumed. This evidence not only adds insight into the subsistence strategies of the tomb's creators, but also suggests that the Altai steppe was seasonally more hospitable than the current climate would imply. Combined with isotopic data from preserved bones, the pollen traces hint that the occupants may have migrated along specific ecological corridors, exploiting the region's richer vegetation while maintaining the ritualistic practices reflected in the tomb's construction. Thawing permafrost, snowdrifts, and sudden storms forced the archaeologists into a delicate balance between careful preservation and the relentless forces of nature. Heavy blankets of snow could conceal critical details, while rapid melting threatened to warp wood and fragment textiles. The team worked in shifts, often under headlamps or portable heaters, knowing that one misstep could destroy centuries of preservation. Each discovery came with a heightened awareness of impermanence. The tomb's extraordinary condition was both a gift and a race against time, its frozen stillness offering fleeting clarity in a hostile environment. Authorities arrived with little warning, sealing the mound, restricting access, and removing all records and artifacts from the steppe. Equipment was confiscated, notes were examined under strict supervision, and any attempt at independent reporting was blocked. Official statements cited cultural heritage protection, environmental preservation, and site security, but the speed and thoroughness of the operation suggested a recognition of anomalies that extended beyond typical archaeological interest. For the excavation team, the sudden closure transformed their months of painstaking work into a fleeting glimpse, leaving unanswered questions about the tomb's occupants, their practices, and the reasons behind the extraordinary preservation. Researchers speculated quietly about lost lineages, ceremonial anomalies, and foreign influence, yet the tomb's frozen silence yielded no confirmations. Could the tomb belong to an unrecorded elite group, one that practiced a unique form of funerary ritual? Were the artifacts evidence of far-reaching trade networks, unknown migrations, or ceremonial practices abandoned by other steppe communities? Each theory was constrained by the site's inaccessibility, leaving only fragments of observation, laboratory results, and comparative analysis with other kurgans to inform cautious hypotheses. Even the patterns of placement within the chamber resisted easy interpretation, hinting at knowledge or beliefs now vanished. Even stripped of light and warmth, Altai Kurgan IX seemed to defy temporal understanding, preserving a narrative that no history book could yet contain. Its frozen chambers, meticulously constructed and extraordinarily preserved, stood as a testament to human ingenuity, ritual practice, and the enduring enigma of cultures lost to time. The interplay of permafrost, craftsmanship, and secrecy ensured that every artifact carried both historical significance and profound mystery. The tomb, a bridge to a civilization glimpsed only briefly through a narrow window before the ice and the authorities closed it once again. Entombed beneath snow and secrecy, the kurgan holds its silent truths, a frozen story that may never thaw for human eyes. The Whispering Tunnel of Sardinia. A faint murmur echoed through the narrow stone passage, carrying voices that seemed to originate from nowhere, guiding explorers toward the entrance of the Whispering Tunnel. Carved walls, worn smooth over centuries, revealed the tunnel's deliberate shaping, though its full extent remained hidden beneath shadows and drifting dust. Authorities quickly closed the site, citing both preservation and safety, leaving the phenomenon unexplained and the chamber off limits to the public. Even in brief observation, the tunnel conveyed a sense of deliberate human design, its winding corridors and hidden chambers hinting at purposes that have long been lost to memory. The tunnel was first recorded by a team surveying Sardinia's neuralgic sites, who noticed its distinctive acoustics while mapping nearby hypogeums and tombs. Initial exploration revealed passages that twisted and narrowed unpredictably, confounding even experienced spelunkers. Surveyors noted that the murmurs seemed to follow specific paths, amplifying or dissipating depending on the geometry of the chambers. Equipment captured faint reverberations that suggested deliberate construction techniques, yet the exact methods used to achieve the acoustic effects remained a mystery. Limestone formations twisted into narrow corridors and vaulted ceilings, punctuated by chambers hewn with surprising precision for prehistoric tools. In places, volcanic rock had been incorporated into the walls, creating contrasts in texture and resonance that amplified sound in unpredictable ways. Sedimentary layering along the walls provided subtle clues about the tunnel's age, suggesting repeated use and modification over centuries. The combination of natural formations and human craftsmanship created a labyrinthine structure, one that challenged understanding and seemed to respond to movement and sound as if alive. Each step inside triggered a resonance that intensified whispers into a low chorus, an effect researchers believe could have been intentional for ritual purposes. The phenomenon was not merely an echo but seemed to interact with the chamber's geometry, creating localized acoustic nodes where even a whisper could be heard across the corridor. Early hypotheses proposed that the tunnel might have been used for ceremonial chanting or communication, allowing voices to carry without exposure. The careful alignment of walls, chambers and openings indicated knowledge of sound dynamics unusual for the period, yet how this knowledge was acquired remains unknown. Scattered fragments of pottery, stone blades, and symbolic carvings hinted at human activity that had long vanished, leaving only traces embedded in sediment and wall surfaces. Tiny shards of clay suggested storage or ritual vessels, while carved patterns in the limestone resembled abstract symbols whose meanings have been lost. Researchers also observed small depressions in the floor that may have held altars or offerings, though centuries of sediment had obscured their original forms. These subtle remnants painted a picture of a space used not only for passage, but for ceremony, reflection, or interaction with forces now indecipherable. Mineral coatings along the tunnel walls bore subtle pigment residues, suggesting that the chambers may have once been decorated for ritual use. Microscopic examination showed residues of red ochre and charcoal, consistent with prehistoric art found in other neuralgic hypogeums. These markings could have served symbolic or ritual functions, marking thresholds, chambers, or passages for ceremonial procession. In certain alcoves, the pigments were more concentrated, hinting at areas of heightened importance within the tunnel. The presence of such decorations, coupled with the acoustic properties of the chambers, suggests that sound, colour and space were deliberately combined to create an immersive sensory experience for those who entered. This adds a new layer to understanding the tunnel as not merely a passageway but as a carefully designed ceremonial environment. The tunnel likely belonged to the neuralgic civilization, a culture known for complex stonework and ritual spaces, though the precise function of this subterranean passage remains uncertain. Some chambers may have served as sacred areas, while others were practical corridors connecting storage or burial sites. Sardinia's neuralgic peoples are also known for circular towers, or neurages, many of which contain interior chambers and platforms with acoustic peculiarities, suggesting that sound played a cultural or spiritual role. The Whispering Tunnel may have been part of a wider network of ceremonial and functional structures, connecting the living world with spaces set apart for rites or ancestral veneration. Following its discovery, government officials imposed strict access restrictions, citing both the danger of unstable rock and the cultural sensitivity of the site. Scholars were allowed only brief visits under supervision, and all photography or sampling was tightly controlled. Maps and sonar data exist, but public access has been entirely forbidden, reinforcing the tunnel's air of secrecy. Local authorities acknowledged the site's archaeological importance but declined to provide explanations for its acoustic effects, emphasizing that safety and preservation were the primary concerns. The combination of restriction and mystery transformed the tunnel from a historical site into a contemporary enigma. Despite careful measurement and documentation, The origin of the whispering effect continues to puzzle acousticians and archaeologists alike. Some speculate it was deliberately engineered, while others suggest a rare combination of geology and construction amplified natural sounds. Experiments with sound resonance and vocalization have revealed patterns, but no theory fully accounts for the clarity and distribution of whispers throughout the chambers. Even modern acoustic modelling struggles to replicate the phenomenon, leaving the tunnel's design as much an auditory riddle as a physical one. For those who have briefly glimpsed its walls, the Whispering Tunnel conveys an almost spectral presence, a human voice from the past reverberating through space and time. The combination of sound, shadow, and the sense of confinement produces an unsettling yet captivating experience. Even absent direct observation, the idea of the tunnel evokes the ingenuity of prehistoric architects who manipulated both stone and space to create effects that survive millennia. It is a place where history, geology, and mystery intersect, and where centuries-old secrets remain suspended, audible only to the daring and the fortunate few who have heard its echoes. No visitor has yet emerged without a sense that the tunnel itself is speaking, though its message remains indecipherable. The sealed grotto of the Peloponnese. A subtle outline of a doorway emerged along the limestone cliff, its narrow shadow hinting at a hidden chamber long untouched by human hands. As the team investigated, they realized that this was no ordinary fissure. Inside lay walls painted with ancient motifs and artifacts preserved under layers of sediment and debris, sealed away for centuries. Scholars quickly designated the site the sealed grotto of the Peloponnese, noting that the preserved pigments and structural details suggested human activity predating any known settlements in the region. The entrance had evidently been deliberately blocked, leaving a silent, untouched record of ritual or domestic practice hidden from view. The Peloponnesian landscape surrounding the grotto is a labyrinth of limestone cliffs, rugged karst formations, and naturally occurring subterranean channels carved over millennia by water and erosion. Reaching the site demanded careful negotiation of steep inclines, loose stone, and precarious ledges, often forcing the team to employ ropes and scaffolding. Inside, the microclimate presented unique challenges. Pockets of high humidity combined with residual cool from shaded rock faces, creating condensation that threatened both fragile pigments and delicate artifacts. Each step within the grotto required precision, a careful balance between observation and preservation, as even the slightest disturbance could compromise centuries of untouched history. The interior expanded into a network of chambers and recesses, some intimate, others expansive, punctuated by niches cut into the limestone. Evidence suggested intentional human modification. Flattened floors, stone ledges, and low partitions indicated purposeful use, while some chambers appeared undisturbed since their original ceiling. Certain passages showed faint signs of repeated visitation, implying rituals or maintenance by successive generations. The interplay of natural geology and human design created a deliberate symmetry, a fusion that suggested more than mere habitation and hinted at ceremonial or sacred function. Recovered from the earth were shards of pottery, carved stone tools, small figurines, and fragments of plaster painted with faint colours. Analysis of the pigments revealed red ochre and charcoal, alongside traces of copper-based minerals, suggesting experimentation with early metallurgical techniques. Motifs on the walls and pottery combined geometric patterns, abstract animals, and designs that would later appear in Mycenaean art, yet carbon dating placed them centuries earlier. This intersection of familiar and anomalous forms implied either a previously unknown Proto-Greek culture or an isolated ceremonial tradition, leaving archaeologists both intrigued and unsettled by the unexpected sophistication. Ochre and charcoal marks on fragments of the collapsed ceiling revealed delicate handprints and finger strokes, evidence that the grotto's occupants had practiced symbolic marking in a distant past. Microscopic analysis of these impressions indicates that they were made with deliberate intention rather than incidental contact. Some handprints were partially overlaid with pigment patterns similar to those found on the walls, implying ritual repetition or communal participation. Comparable finds in other Mediterranean caves suggest that marking walls with hands or fingers served both protective and ceremonial purposes, possibly invoking spiritual presence or asserting territorial claims. These marks add a layer of human intimacy to the otherwise silent chamber, providing a tangible connection between the grotto's creators and the space they carefully sealed for generations. Stratigraphic analysis added further complexity. Layers of soil, ash, and collapsed rock indicated multiple periods of human activity within the grotto. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal and organic matter revealed occupation or ritual use considerably older than known Bronze Age settlements in the southern Peloponnese. Some artifacts had no clear analogue in the region, suggesting either isolated cultural innovation or long-distance trade networks previously unrecorded. Geological evidence, including sediment patterns and natural collapses, supported the notion that the chamber had remained sealed for centuries, preserving an extraordinary record of early human activity. Tiny inclusions of pollen and charred seeds revealed a surprisingly lush environment around the grotto at the time of its use. Analysis indicated a mosaic of wildflowers, shrubs, and small trees, suggesting a microclimate more hospitable than present conditions allow. Combined with small animal bones, this evidence indicated that the grotto's occupants may have relied on a combination of foraging, small-scale animal husbandry, and seasonal occupation. These ecological traces also hinted at possible ceremonial or ritual linkages to the surrounding landscape, giving context to the deliberate sealing of the chambers and their contents. Excavation itself presented formidable challenges. Narrow passages demanded careful scaffolding, and fragile walls had to be stabilized before sampling could occur. High humidity and poor air circulation require constant monitoring to prevent mold growth on pigments and textiles. Even the most cautious work carried risk. A rockfall or inadvertent abrasion could destroy evidence irreparably. Each object removed was meticulously catalogued, photographed, and, when necessary, transported to laboratories for analysis, the team acutely aware that the chamber's preservation was both a gift and a fragile responsibility. Once the grotto's importance was recognized, government authorities acted with immediate intervention. The site was cordoned off, excavation permits suspended, and only a select number of researchers were allowed supervised access. Statements cited cultural heritage protection, environmental fragility, and risk of collapse. But the comprehensiveness and speed of the lockdown suggested recognition of findings beyond ordinary archaeological value. Access remains heavily restricted, leaving scholars to rely on limited photographs, sketches, and laboratory reports to understand the chamber's contents and significance. Interpretation of the grotto remains speculative. Some scholars propose ritual or ceremonial usage, possibly connected to proto-religious practices predating Mycenaean cults. Others suggest temporary habitation or refuge during periods of environmental stress, with the intentional sealing serving to protect both people and sacred objects. Comparisons with other Mediterranean cave sanctuaries reveal similarities in ritual deposition and wall decoration, yet the sealed grotto of the Peloponnese stands apart in its preservation, its deliberate concealment, and the combination of Neolithic and early Bronze Age materials. The site offers a rare glimpse into a culture long obscured by both time and stone. Though direct access remains impossible, the grotto speaks across the span of centuries. Its chambers, pigments, and artifacts preserve a carefully constructed environment, capturing traces of human activity that predate recorded Greek civilization. Every wall marking, every fragment of pottery, and every tool contributes to a silent narrative of ingenuity, devotion, and survival. The sealed nature of the grotto, coupled with the suddenness of its revelation, allows only partial understanding of its original purpose, leaving researchers to piece together histories from shadows and remnants, a puzzle resisting complete resolution. The sealed grotto of the Peloponnese lies buried beneath stone and centuries of silence, a place where even light hesitates to enter. The obscured stairwell of Langonides. A narrow crevice at the base of the mountain revealed the first hint of carefully cut stone steps, their descent swallowed by darkness and centuries of dust. Initial observation suggested a natural fissure, yet the symmetry and regularity of the stones made clear that human hands had carved them with deliberate intent. As the team peered downward, the stairwell appeared to vanish into the mountain itself, a hidden conduit that may have escaped notice for generations. Scholars quickly designated the site the obscured stairwell of Langonides, noting that the precision and placement of the steps implied a purpose beyond simple passage, perhaps ceremonial, perhaps protective, yet entirely unknown. The surrounding Andes rise sharply, their jagged ridges and scree slopes hiding fissures that have long evaded even local shepherds. Temperatures fluctuated dramatically between sunlit cliffs and shadowed valleys, while thin air made every step an effort. Seasonal storms could sweep across the ridges with little warning, adding urgency and danger to exploration. Despite these hazards, the stairwell's location suggested intentional concealment, a natural pocket expanded and reinforced by human design, positioned to remain invisible to casual observation, yet fully navigable by those who knew its secret. Each step was carved with meticulous precision, the stone worn smooth in places, yet reinforced in others as if anticipating countless journeys downward. Some risers bore subtle grooves that may have guided ritual processions or aided foot placement in low-light conditions. The stairwell occasionally widened into small landings, offering spaces that may have served as stations for offerings or pauses during descent. Tool marks preserved in the rock indicate the use of chisels and abrasives, techniques consistent with pre-Columbian Andean practices, though the scale and refinement surpass most documented examples. Impressions left in thin mineral layers along the stairwell revealed the presence of cordage, likely used for hauling objects or aiding descent. Analysis of these salt-encrusted fibers revealed plant-based materials consistent with early Andean weaving techniques, suggesting that the stairwell's builders integrated practical technology with their subterranean design. In some cases, fibers appeared to intersect with carved grooves, implying that ropes were intentionally anchored to the steps or walls for stability. This evidence not only demonstrates advanced engineering for safe navigation in steep or unstable conditions, but also hints at the transport of significant objects, possibly ritual vessels, offerings, or containers of perishable goods, further reinforcing the idea that the stairwell was a site of deliberate and repeated human activity over an extended period. Small niches along the stairwell contained jars sealed with clay stoppers, some inscribed with markings that resisted immediate identification. Inside, fragments of textiles and residues of organic matter hinted at storage or ceremonial deposition rather than mere utility. A few vessels contained traces of pigments and mineral compounds, suggesting rituals involving colouring or symbolic substances. The distribution of these niches, often hidden from view, implied intentional concealment and possibly sacred significance, leaving researchers to wonder whether the stairwell functioned as a passage, a repository, or a place of initiation. Laboratory tests revealed materials and construction methods that predated known Incan techniques, suggesting the stairwell was part of an older, enigmatic culture. Radiocarbon dating of organic remains in the jars and sediments indicated periods of use centuries earlier than most surrounding settlements. The inscriptions bore stylistic features unfamiliar to Andean archaeologists, hinting at either a lost local tradition or influence from distant groups. Even the geometry of the stairwell defied conventional understanding of mountain construction, demonstrating sophisticated planning and engineering in a remote high-altitude environment. Mist from the mountains seeped into the stairwell, condensing on walls and forcing researchers to navigate slippery stone while preserving fragile artifacts. Light from headlamps revealed moisture patterns and mineral deposits that may have been intentionally manipulated to interact with natural illumination. Temperature differences between the surface and the stairwell interior created fog-like conditions, heightening the sense of descent into an unknown and possibly sacred space. Each step downward carried both physical risk and the weight of encountering centuries of hidden human activity. Within days of reporting the find, officials cordoned the area, removing all notes and samples, citing both heritage protection and security concerns. Access became restricted to a handful of accredited researchers, and photographs and sketches were heavily controlled. Statements emphasized preservation and public safety, but the swiftness of the intervention suggested recognition of unusual or highly significant discoveries. The stairwell, once a secret known only to the mountain and its builders, was now under complete governmental oversight, leaving the broader archaeological community dependent on limited documentation. Scholars debated whether the stairwell had served as a ritual passage, a hidden repository, or a ceremonial conduit linking the living with the dead. Comparisons with other Andean subterranean constructions show similarities in orientation and sealed chambers, yet the stairwell's scale, alignment, and artifact contents do not match typical Incan or pre-Incan models. Some argue that it may have been intended to preserve knowledge or sacred objects from view, while others speculate on a practical function linked to seasonal migration or mountain worship. Each hypothesis underscores the stairwell's blend of human ingenuity, ritual complexity, and environmental adaptation. The stairwell's existence challenges assumptions about Andean engineering, ritual practice, and the ingenuity of cultures whose names have been lost to time. Every carefully carved step, each sealed jar, and the enigmatic inscriptions hint at knowledge and practices intentionally concealed from the world above. Even under government supervision, researchers continue to encounter unanswered questions. The purpose of the stairwell, the identity of its builders, and the significance of its contents remain locked within stone. The vertical passage, descending silently into obscurity, preserves its secrets as resolutely as the mountain itself. Descending beneath rock and silence, the obscured stairwell of Langanetes seems to vanish into history, carrying secrets that may never ascend to the light. The Jade Burial Garden of Hoa Bin. Rolling valleys and limestone outcrops of Hoa Bin concealed traces of prehistoric ritual, revealed only when surveyors followed subtle soil depressions and stone patterns. The upland landscape, dotted with scattered rock shelters and river terraces, had long been recognised for its association with early human habitation, yet these shallow pits hinted at something entirely different. The survey team initially approached them as routine excavation sites, but their regular spacing and carefully delineated outlines suggested deliberate construction. Within days, it became clear that the pits were not merely utilitarian. They formed part of an orchestrated arrangement whose purpose transcended everyday life. The Hoa Bin culture, flourishing from roughly 10,000 to 2000 BCE, is known for sophisticated stone tools and early settlement organisation, yet few examples hint at complex ritual landscapes. Anthropologists have long studied their semi-nomadic communities, noting the prevalence of leaf-shaped spearheads, grinding stones, and hearths. While most sites reflect subsistence activities, the jade-lined pits stood apart, indicating a ceremonial or symbolic significance previously unrecorded. Their presence challenged assumptions about ritual scale in prehistoric northern Vietnam, suggesting that social and spiritual practices may have been far more elaborate than surviving evidence elsewhere implies. Excavators uncovered shallow pits lined with carefully placed stones, each positioned with a precision that suggested deliberate geometric intent. Some pits were circular, others oval, but all maintained consistent proportions, hinting at measurement or design principles. The bottoms of the depressions were flattened and occasionally coated with mineral residues, possibly to enhance preservation or imbue symbolic meaning. Certain pits were grouped in clusters that suggested sequences or hierarchies, a pattern invisible to the untrained eye yet unmistakable once mapped. The symmetry, alignment, and relative spacing immediately distinguished these burial features from natural soil depressions or simple refuse pits. Smooth jade slabs and intricately shaped ornaments lay within the pits, some bearing faint striations indicating specialized tools or symbolic engraving. Each piece was unique, yet collectively they adhered to a subtle aesthetic coherence, with green and bluish tones carefully arranged to catch reflected sunlight at specific times of day. Some artifacts resembled miniature axes, others oblong amulets, and a few were fashioned into abstract geometric shapes. Compositional analysis revealed that certain jades originated from distant deposits, suggesting trade networks or pilgrimages far beyond the local valleys, linking these seemingly isolated ceremonial sites to broader prehistoric exchange systems. Traces of organic matter and fragmentary remains suggested ceremonial depositions, with placement carefully coordinated relative to the jade artifacts. Charred bones, plant residues, and pollen grains provided clues to ritual practices, hinting at offerings or feasting activities accompanying the interments. The remains were rarely complete skeletons, often partial or selectively deposited, indicating a highly controlled form of deposition rather than mere burial. Observers noted that the orientation of bones and artifacts adhered to cardinal directions or subtle solar alignments, further implying symbolic intent and an understanding of environmental patterns. When mapped, the pits formed subtle grids and angles that aligned with natural contours and perhaps seasonal sun paths, indicating an understanding of both landscape and cosmic cycles. The arrangement suggested more than aesthetic consideration. It hinted at a conceptual framework integrating celestial observation with terrestrial topography. Lines drawn between pit clusters often intersected at notable natural features such as limestone ridges or water channels, implying an awareness of local geography as part of ritual design. Archaeologists speculated that the configuration could have marked ceremonial routes, solar events, or social hierarchy, yet definitive evidence remained elusive under layers of soil and centuries of erosion. Soil acidity and fluctuating groundwater presented constant threats to artifact survival, necessitating meticulous excavation and conservation strategies. Teams worked slowly, using brushes and fine trowels, constantly monitoring pH levels and moisture content to prevent jade degradation. Even small vibrations or exposure to air caused subtle changes in the coloration of certain slabs, underscoring the delicate balance between preservation and study. Researchers noted that some pits had naturally dried microclimates, preserving pigments and organic residues that offered rare insights into prehistoric ritual materials. The careful handling of each feature became an act of reverence, as the site's fragility and precision demanded patience and restraint. Local authorities swiftly imposed restrictions on further digging, citing both cultural heritage concerns and the delicate, irreplaceable nature of the jade deposits. Permits were limited, and documentation was controlled to prevent unauthorized dissemination of images or mapping data. Security patrols monitored the area, ensuring that only accredited archaeologists could access the most sensitive clusters. While such intervention initially frustrated the research team, it became clear that protection measures preserved not only artifacts but the enigmatic arrangement itself, leaving the garden intact for careful analysis over generations rather than scattered by premature excavation. The arrangement and craftsmanship of the pits hint at social hierarchies, ritual sophistication, and knowledge systems now lost to time. Scholars debated whether the jade was intended primarily as a funerary offering, a territorial marker, or a medium for ancestral communication. The uniformity and careful placement of materials suggested coordination by an organized community capable of mobilizing labor, sourcing rare materials, and sustaining ceremonial traditions across generations. Yet, without written records, the intentions behind these jade burial gardens remained speculative, their precise meaning veiled beneath the soil even as their form conveys a deliberate, intelligent design. Within Huabin's meticulously arranged jade pits, subtle alignments hinted understanding and ritual now lost to time. The silent workshop beneath Cahokia. Surveys of Cahokia's mounds uncovered irregularities in the subsoil, suggesting the presence of chambers left untouched by time. The city, sprawling across Illinois floodplains, is famed for its Monk's Mound and other monumental earthworks, yet few had considered the possibility of subterranean spaces serving practical rather than ceremonial purposes. Initial probes revealed unusual density variations in the soil, suggesting cavities reinforced with stone or compacted earth. Excavators proceeded cautiously, aware that the region's dense clay and fluctuating water table could obscure or collapse fragile structures, but the measurements were consistent, hinting at something deliberate hidden below. The Mississippian city, bustling between 1050 and 1350 CE, was renowned for its monumental earthworks and densely organized urban settlements, yet little suggested subterranean industry. Cahokia's population may have reached 20,000 at its peak, organized around plazas, causeways, and residential clusters. While scholars have long studied its ceremonial mounds, artisan workshops were thought to be modest and surface level. The discovery of concealed chambers with evidence of tool production suggested a level of technical organization previously unrecognized. These findings demanded a reconsideration of the technological and social sophistication of Mississippian society. The team entered the earth-hidden chamber, discovering an interior of reinforced walls and level floors, each element arranged with purposeful intent. The chamber measured roughly 12 meters in length, with narrow passageways connecting smaller compartments. Floor surfaces were compacted and smooth, with occasional stone inlays indicating careful planning. Timber supports, long decayed, had once held the ceiling, and faint scorch marks suggested repeated exposure to heat. The chamber's configuration implied repeated and intentional human use, rather than accidental voids or simple storage, hinting at organised activity that modern investigators could only begin to reconstruct. Rows of tools, some fashioned from unusual alloys, lay arranged with precision, showing wear patterns that implied repeated skilled use. Chisels, small hammers, and prismatic blades were found alongside fragments of copper, bronze, and composite metals unfamiliar in other regional Mississippian contexts. Some implements bore geometric engravings or inscriptions, the purpose of which remains uncertain. Metallurgical analysis revealed traces of heating and tempering, indicating controlled manipulation of material properties. The precision of tool shaping and alignment suggested the chamber functioned as more than a casual workspace. It represented a site of systematic craftsmanship, possibly experimental or highly specialized. Workstations, niches, and storage alcoves were positioned for efficiency, hinting at systematic production or experimentation rather than casual use. Certain niches held remnants of alloy ingots, while others contained organic materials like plant fibers or resin that may have been used in tool casting or finishing processes. The arrangement of benches and stations suggested task specialization, with designated areas for cutting, forging, and finishing. Small depressions in the floor hinted at the placement of containers or molds, while narrow channels may have facilitated airflow or drainage. The careful spatial organization indicates that whoever operated this workshop understood principles of ergonomics, workflow, and environmental control. The tools bore subtle residues of pigments and binding agents, evidence of processes that carried both practical and symbolic significance. Researchers discovered faint red and yellow ochre residues on the edges of chisels and small blades, suggesting some tools may have been used to mark or finish ceremonial objects. Sticky plant resins preserved in small containers indicate a possible binding or coating technique applied to metals or wood, which could have enhanced durability or created specific surface effects. These findings imply that the workshop was not purely industrial, but a space where functional craftsmanship intersected with aesthetic or ritualized practices, merging technology and culture. Radiocarbon samples and artifact typology suggested a timeline both consistent with Cahokia's peak and unexpectedly advanced in metallurgical skill. Charcoal from hearth residues and organic matter embedded in soil matrices were dated to the 12th century CE, contemporaneous with Cahokia's major urban expansion. Yet the presence of alloys and tools previously unrecorded in the Mississippian toolkit suggests technological experimentation or knowledge borrowed from elsewhere. These chronological anomalies raise questions about the diffusion of metallurgical techniques in pre-Columbian North America and whether Cahokia might have hosted innovators whose methods have left no trace in surviving records. Ventilation channels, heat discoloration on stone, and residual mineral deposits suggested that the chamber had once supported high-temperature activity in a carefully controlled environment. Narrow shafts connected the workshop to surface air, allowing smoke and heat to escape while maintaining internal temperature stability. Burn marks on stone floors corresponded with areas of repeated forging or smelting, and faint metallic residues indicated alloy production. Soil analysis revealed subtle pH changes consistent with chemical reactions from heated metals. Collectively, these features point to deliberate environmental management, demonstrating an advanced understanding of both material behavior and workspace safety. Authorities quickly restricted access, citing both preservation concerns and the potential danger of unknown residues, leaving the site largely undisturbed. Excavation permits were limited, and much of the initial documentation remains classified or embargoed. Remote imaging and limited soil sampling have been allowed, but researchers cannot fully reconstruct the workshop's original function. These measures have preserved delicate artifacts, floor layouts, and chemical signatures, preventing contamination and loss. The rapid institutional intervention underscored the chamber's uniqueness and the perception that its contents could radically expand our understanding of Cahokian technology if studied responsibly. The chamber challenges assumptions about Mississippian technological capabilities, hinting at knowledge of alloys and production techniques that have no parallel in surviving records. Its organization suggests a level of industrial sophistication previously unimagined for pre-Columbian North America, revealing specialized labor, material expertise, and possibly even experimentation with new metallurgical processes. The scale and complexity of the workshop invite speculation about its role in the city's economy, social hierarchy, or ceremonial practices connected to technological mastery. Yet without full access, the chamber remains a silent testament to innovation lost to history. The silent workshop beneath the mounds of Cahokia preserves tools and metalwork, a testament to skills lost long before writing recorded them. The drowned causeway of the Sunda Shelf. At the edge of Southeast Asia's shallow seas, sonar scans first revealed a linear formation stretching beneath the waters of the Sunda Shelf. The region, largely hidden beneath tens of meters of ocean, had long been considered a drowned extension of the mainland, submerged during the last glacial maximum. Initial low-tide reconnaissance revealed faint lines of stone and sediment exposed briefly above water, hinting at structures aligned with remarkable precision. Survey teams quickly mobilized, employing sonar mapping and diver reconnaissance to capture the full extent of the formation, noting immediately that the scale far exceeded any known coastal modification in the region. Thousands of years ago, when global sea levels were far lower, the Sunda Shelf was exposed as fertile land, crisscrossed by rivers and dotted with early human settlements. Paleoenvironmental studies indicate that around 18,000 years ago this landmass would have been habitable, supporting a range of flora and fauna now lost to the ocean. Migratory pathways from mainland Southeast Asia to islands now separated by water would have been accessible, allowing for both seasonal movement and permanent settlements. Archaeologists have long theorized that Sundaland harbored significant prehistoric populations, but evidence has been scarce, leaving many aspects of early maritime culture shrouded in uncertainty. Detailed multi-beam mapping traced a path over several kilometers, its straightness and width suggesting deliberate construction rather than a natural sedimentary feature. The causeway maintained a consistent gradient, rising slightly in places where shallow channels once cut across the landscape. Sonar images revealed linear arrangements of stones and compacted sediments, interrupted only by occasional breaches created by tidal erosion. Diver observations confirmed that some stones were intentionally positioned, their flat surfaces aligned to create a smooth surface, suggesting functionality that extended beyond incidental geological deposition. Examination of submerged stones and compacted sediments revealed consistent placement, with certain blocks cut or arranged to endure tidal currents and shifting sands. While some blocks bore natural fractures, others showed chisel marks consistent with human modification, a remarkable feat for a structure now thousands of years underwater. Sediment cores taken nearby indicated stratification incompatible with natural river deposition, further supporting the hypothesis of deliberate construction. The causeway's design, extending over multiple kilometers and with uniform width and alignment, implies a coordinated effort by a community with considerable knowledge of engineering and hydrology. Tiny incisions and patterned grooves on select stones hinted at deliberate shaping, suggesting tools or techniques previously unrecorded in Southeast Asian prehistory. Researchers found small, parallel striations and chisel-like marks along the tops of several blocks, implying careful dressing to create a smoother, more stable surface. Residual mineral deposits indicate that the stones may have been treated with water or natural binders to strengthen cohesion between them, a method not documented elsewhere on the Sunda Shelf. These details point to a level of engineering sophistication beyond simple causeway construction, implying knowledge of material properties and long-term durability considerations. Luminescence tests and organic residues indicated ages far older than conventional coastal settlements, placing the causeway in a period when the land was still dry. Samples of quartz and feldspar within the compacted sediments returned dates between 14,000 and 18,000 years ago, a time when rising sea levels had yet to inundate the shelf. Charred plant matter and shell fragments embedded within the sediments provided additional context, confirming human presence and activity. These dates challenge previous assumptions about the timing and sophistication of prehistoric societies in the region, suggesting advanced knowledge of large-scale construction long before previously documented in Southeast Asia. Comparisons to other submerged structures around the globe raise questions about prehistoric engineering, long-distance communication, and trade networks that may have once crossed Sundaland. From the sunken stone alignments of Doggerland in the North Sea to the submerged cities of Japan's Jomon period, parallels emerge. Yet the Sunda Shelf Causeway remains remarkable for its scale and orientation. Its linear precision, combined with evidence of deliberate construction, raises the possibility that it functioned as a transportation corridor, ritual pathway, or even a trade route connecting early communities across the shelf. Tides expose and conceal the formation in shifting patterns, leaving fragments visible only intermittently and complicating survey and preservation efforts. The intertidal reveal allows only brief observation windows during which researchers document changes in stone placement, sediment erosion, and biological growth. Currents deposit silt and sand in some sections, while marine organisms colonize others, masking the structure and creating a dynamic, ever-changing surface. The interplay between water, tide, and substrate gives the causeway a spectral quality, visible only at certain hours, and further obscures the full extent of the original construction. Regional authorities restricted access almost immediately, citing hazards and preservation concerns, leaving large portions of the causeway unmapped and unexplored. Government vessels monitor the area, limiting dives and surveying to authorized personnel, while satellite and sonar imaging are permitted only under strict supervision. This controlled access has preserved delicate structural features and sediment layers, but also ensures that public knowledge remains incomplete. Researchers working within the restrictions describe a sense of urgency and secrecy, as every observation could significantly alter the understanding of prehistoric Southeast Asian engineering. Despite its visibility at low tide, the causeway resists full interpretation, raising enduring questions about who built it, why, and how it fits into early human migration across Southeast Asia. Was it a practical route connecting settlements, a ceremonial structure marking the land, or an engineering experiment lost with the rising seas? The scale, age, and precision of the construction defy easy explanation and continue to challenge archaeologists, geologists, and anthropologists alike. Each survey reveals new anomalies, leaving as many questions as answers, and ensuring that the causeway's true purpose remains shrouded beneath the waves. As tides reclaim the Sunda Shelf, the drowned causeway remains, a faint trace of an ancient world submerged yet unwilling to vanish completely. The Moonstone Chamber of Varanasi. Centuries of devotion have layered Varanasi with streets, ghats, and temples, each level concealing traces of the generations that came before. The city, one of the oldest continuously inhabited on Earth, holds a dense lattice of sacred architecture intertwined with civic life. Every step along the ghats echoes past rituals, festivals, and pilgrimages, yet beneath the familiar bustle, hidden spaces lie undisturbed, silent witnesses to practices long forgotten. Among these buried layers, scholars have speculated on chambers deliberately concealed to preserve sacred knowledge or to restrict access to ritual objects, their existence hinted at only through fragments of records and subtle anomalies in the city's stonework. Reflections flickered unexpectedly across stone foundations, catching the light in patterns that seemed deliberate rather than incidental. During preliminary surveys and minor restoration work near an ancient temple complex, conservators noticed that certain stones shimmered faintly when exposed to sunlight or torchlight, an effect inconsistent with ordinary mineral deposits. Some patterns aligned with architectural features, suggesting they were intentionally positioned to interact with natural illumination. Local lore added to the intrigue. Whispered stories of hidden sanctuaries beneath the city had persisted for centuries, tales of luminous chambers where priests and monks once performed rites unseen by the general populace. Texts and temple records hint at hidden sanctuaries beneath the city, spaces reserved for ceremonies that few were permitted to witness. Ancient manuscripts describe inner chambers of light, and stones that hold the moon's glow, though interpretations have long been debated. Archaeologists and historians note that the Varanasi urban landscape grew organically over millennia, often building over prior foundations. In some areas, ritual spaces were intentionally incorporated into subsequent structures, preserving their sanctity while rendering them invisible to casual observation. These accounts suggest that any subterranean chamber discovered today may have been central to long-forgotten religious or ceremonial practices. Beneath the city, layers of silt, sand, and limestone hold fragments of materials that suggest subterranean construction and the presence of rare stones. Geological surveys indicate that pockets of moonstone, prized for its luminescent qualities, were historically quarried nearby. The mineral deposits found beneath temple floors are consistent with imported or locally sourced moonstone, polished and placed with care. Micro-excavation revealed evidence of deliberate stone lining and foundation modifications, reinforcing the idea that builders sought to create a chamber designed to interact with light and shadow in specific ways. These findings point to both architectural sophistication and ritual intent. During routine restoration, conservators noticed subtle temperature differences and faint luminescence seeping through cracks in the stone floors. The anomalies prompted careful imaging using ground-penetrating radar and low-intensity infrared scans, which revealed hollow spaces consistent with a substantial underground chamber. Initial probes confirmed that the space had been deliberately sealed, with access points obscured by centuries of flooring, sediment, and construction debris. The combination of thermal variance and light reflection suggested not only hidden volume but also materials with unusual optical properties, later identified as thinly cut sheets of polished moonstone, arranged to capture and scatter light in ways that defied natural explanation. Inside the chamber, walls glimmer with polished moonstone, casting a muted glow that illuminates niches, inscriptions, and carefully placed objects. The floor, paved with flat stone slabs, bore shallow depressions aligned with the wall niches, indicating spaces for offerings or ritual placement of artifacts. Some inscriptions were etched directly into stone, others were applied as pigment layers now partially faded. Among the items discovered were small ceramic vessels, metallic ritual implements, and traces of organic matter, possibly incense or other ceremonial residues. The arrangement suggested meticulous planning, with both geometry and material chosen to enhance the chamber's visual and symbolic impact. Delicate scratches on the moonstone surfaces revealed patterns that correspond to celestial alignments, hinting at astronomical knowledge embedded within the chamber's design. Researchers noted that certain moonstone panels and floor depressions aligned with the solstice sunrise and specific lunar cycles, suggesting the chamber may have functioned as a ritual observatory as well as a sacred sanctuary. The orientation of inscriptions and niches coincided with cardinal points, enhancing the interplay of natural light and luminescence during key astronomical events. Similar alignment patterns are found in other South Asian sacred structures, yet the moonstone chamber uniquely integrates these principles underground, where sunlight barely penetrates. This combination of celestial mapping and subterranean concealment underscores an advanced understanding of astronomy and ritual, emphasizing that the chamber's purpose was as symbolic as it was practical. Laboratory examination revealed artifacts and construction techniques that predate many known phases of Varanasi's urban development, defying chronological expectations. Radiocarbon dating of organic residues in vessels, along with isotopic analysis of mineral compositions, indicated that the chamber's initial construction may have occurred centuries earlier than previously documented subterranean structures in the city. Stylistic analysis of inscriptions revealed iconography unfamiliar to standard South Asian archaeological typologies, suggesting either a localized tradition now lost or influences from distant cultural networks. The chamber's combination of luminescent stone, sealed preservation, and ceremonial layout marks it as an extraordinary example of ancient urban ingenuity. Humidity, urban vibration, and delicate materials required immediate intervention, prompting authorities to seal the chamber and restrict access entirely. Protective measures included controlled access protocols, climate stabilization, and careful monitoring of structural integrity to prevent collapse or degradation. Statements from officials emphasized cultural heritage preservation, though the unusual luminescence and anomalous artifacts undoubtedly contributed to the urgency and secrecy. Even researchers permitted to study the chamber were restricted to minimal documentation, intensifying the sense of mystery and elevating the chamber's status as a site of both scholarly fascination and institutional control. Even with a limited study, the chamber challenges assumptions about sacred architecture, material knowledge, and the ways ancient urban planners interacted with subterranean spaces. Its existence demonstrates deliberate integration of optical properties, ritualized placement of artifacts, and sophisticated engineering that allowed a hidden sanctuary to survive centuries of urban development above. The Moonstone Chamber of Varanasi is a testament to the ingenuity and reverence of those who designed it, a space where light and stone converge in deliberate obscurity, and where the traces of human devotion endure in quiet luminescence, awaiting interpretation. The moonstone chamber of Varanasi resonates through time, centuries of devotion leaving its light untouched and its meaning unspoken. The subterranean hall of the Zagros Fold. As the drill bit pierced the folded rock of the Zagros Range, a sudden hollow resonance startled the operators and hinted at something extraordinary below. The region, renowned for its tectonic complexity, had been the focus of industrial surveys for decades. Yet this vibration suggested a space intentionally hollowed and reinforced, rather than a natural cavity. Initially dismissed as equipment feedback, repeated resonance tests confirmed that the void extended far beyond expected parameters. By triangulating sound waves and preliminary laser mapping, the team realized that they were on the brink of encountering a structure unlike anything documented in the Zagros Fold or surrounding Mesopotamian plateau. The Zagros Fold is a tapestry of limestone and shale, contorted by millennia of tectonic pressure, leaving little room for natural cavities of this scale. Rock strata bend and fracture in patterns dictated by plate collisions, producing steep ridges and narrow valleys, but rarely open chambers of uniform height or breadth. Sediment deposits within these layers are heavily compacted, making excavation an immense challenge. The sheer improbability of finding a hall in such geologically hostile conditions heightened the sense of mystery. This was not merely an accidental space, but the product of deliberate intervention, hidden beneath layers of stone designed to withstand both time and the Earth's relentless movement. Thermal scans and laser mapping revealed a vast hall supported by stone pillars, each bearing scorch marks and symmetrical patterns that defied natural formation. The pillars rose in perfect alignment, spaced at regular intervals, with walls exhibiting planar smoothness unusual for subterranean rock. The scorching suggested exposure to intense heat, far beyond what could be attributed to natural friction or tectonic stress, possibly from controlled fires, metallurgical processes, or ceremonial activity. Shadows traced the contours of the space in ways that hinted at deliberate orientation, while minor fissures aligned too precisely to be random. For a structure buried within folded rock, the precision was remarkable, and its builder's skill immediately apparent. Microscopic analysis of mineral residues on the scorched pillars revealed traces of alloys and compounds not native to the immediate region. Tiny particles of copper, tin, and rare iron alloys suggested metallurgical knowledge far exceeding what was previously documented for contemporaneous societies in the Zagros. Some residues contained mineral signatures traceable to regions hundreds of kilometers away, hinting at early trade networks or the movement of skilled artisans across the plateau. Layered deposits on pillar surfaces indicated repeated heating cycles, implying controlled thermal processes rather than accidental fire. These findings point to a hall engineered not only for structural and ceremonial purposes, but also as a space of experimental technology, blending geology, metallurgy, and human ingenuity. Traces of bronze alloys, stone tools, and faint pigments clung to the walls and pillars, evidence of human presence and technological sophistication long before expected. Small fragments of bronze suggested tools or implements shaped for specific functions, while pigments hinted at decorative or symbolic intent. Some residues matched local mineral deposits, while others originated from distant regions, indicating trade or knowledge networks far broader than previously documented. Even the wear patterns on stone surfaces implied repeated human activity, with certain areas showing deliberate polishing or abrasion. These details revealed not just a chamber, but a controlled and purposeful environment, one that likely served multiple intertwined functions over centuries. Preliminary dating placed portions of the structure centuries earlier than any known metallurgy in the region, raising questions about the builder's identity and capabilities. Thermoluminescence measurements of mineral deposits and radiocarbon dating of organic remnants suggest a construction period, predating established urban centres in nearby valleys. This discrepancy challenges conventional archaeological timelines, implying either an unknown civilization or a technological anomaly among known peoples. If confirmed, these dates could redefine regional prehistory, suggesting an advanced understanding of construction, metallurgy, and subterranean engineering previously thought impossible in this area. Heat radiated unevenly through the chamber, while pockets of stagnant air and mineral dust made human entry both challenging and perilous. Temperature variations, likely caused by residual thermal events or chemical reactions within the pillars, created microclimates, while carbonates and fine sediment posed inhalation hazards. Remote sensors indicated airflow limited to narrow channels, further complicating exploration. The physical environment amplified the hall's aura. It was not only hidden by rock, but actively inhospitable, discouraging casual intrusion and perhaps ensuring the preservation of artifacts and features that modern science might otherwise disturb. Within hours of confirmation, authorities secured the site, removing personnel and equipment, citing both cultural preservation and unexplained environmental hazards. Access to the hall was strictly limited, with only minimal remote observations permitted. Government statements referenced safety protocols and heritage protection, though internal communications hinted at extraordinary significance. Satellite imagery, geological reports, and raw data were withheld from public release, adding a layer of secrecy to an already enigmatic discovery. The swift intervention reinforced the impression that this hall, its scorched pillars, and its unknown origin were considered too valuable or too dangerous to remain accessible. Comparisons with other regional constructions reveal nothing of equal scale or craftsmanship, suggesting a previously unknown tradition of subterranean architecture. While the Zagros region contains caves, qanats, and rudimentary shelters, none approach the symmetry, thermal engineering, or material sophistication of this hall. The combination of scorched stone, aligned pillars, and embedded alloys points to a deliberate integration of functional, ritualistic, and possibly defensive purposes. Scholars have speculated that such a hall might have been used for metallurgical experimentation, storage of valuable goods, or ceremonial gatherings in a controlled subterranean environment, yet definitive conclusions remain elusive given restricted access. Even the limited glimpses captured by remote imaging hint at rituals, production, or storage practices that may have been lost to time, leaving interpretation largely speculative. Symbols carved into pillar bases, alignments suggesting light interaction, and discrete compartments within the hall all suggest intentional design beyond mere shelter. Yet without direct study, the full scope of the hall's purpose remains uncertain. Its very existence challenges assumptions about ancient capabilities, regional connectivity, and the intersection of natural geology with human engineering. For now, the subterranean hall stands as a silent testament to ingenuity that modern science can observe but cannot fully unravel. Deep within folded rock and scorched stone, the subterranean hall of the Zagros Fold endures, a monument of heat, stone, and human design whose origin remains unsolved.